Okay.
We need just a second longer here to get set up.
Before Jeff got and he's like, oh, I just come right on the prayers and it's too late for that back to school. You know, they could have prayers. They have some farmer and
See here. I'm sure it's coming.
Did you get it?
We're live.
I got it came through on my phone. I'm just waiting.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna get rolling here. I'd like to open our special meeting for January 15th. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Nielsen,
I'm here.
Councilmember Giles,
Here.
Councilmember Machezik,
Here.
Councilmember Nelson,
Here.
Councilmember Thrower,
Here.
Okay, can everyone stand up for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So plug it.
I just sent it to
Take
you
it out of the-
via email.
Okay.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we don't have a consent agenda. So I guess we'll roll into general public comment. Did everyone receive the public comments? I believe we got 3 comments.
Yes.
Email this afternoon. And is anyone signed up to speak online?
Oh, no, nobody's
Okay.
in.
And we have one person signed up. If you would like to speak, Steve Kibney, are you interested in making a comment?
Is this my only opportunity to make a comment?
We'll,
Yes.
this is
Okay.
the public comment opportunity, so
My
Please
comment
step
is-
to the,
Come on.
Lectern.
yes.
come on up and just state your name and address, and then you have 3 minutes.
It should be quick. My name is Steve Caveney. I live at 1563 McCall Avenue. And my comment would be to request that you guys keep the current form of the lease that me and my neighbors have agreed to and signed on to, with the understanding that that lease was going to be transferable in its current and 100-year form, which was our understanding. So please keep that in mind as you consider, I think, your second action item for tonight.
Right?
Is that all? It's my first time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
Thank you, that's all.
Appreciate the comment, yeah. Stick around for the discussion. Okay, is there anyone else in the room that would like to make a public comment for the evening? Okay. Seeing none, we'll begin our business agenda. We're starting out with the impact fee study update from Michelle.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen.
Perfect. All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Michelle Grunewald, Community and Economic Development Director. The first item on your agenda this evening is to touch base and give you an update on our impact fee study. Here. Go ahead, Max. There you go. Did you get
Just
it?
down.
Okay, all right. Computers are hard when they're other people's. So anyway, so this evening, just to give you an overview of this item, we will basically provide a background of impact fees within the city of McCall, what's been done to date. We'll go over at a very high level the basics of impact fees, what's eligible, what the process is, about the advisory committee. And Colin, our consultant, is going to provide that information. And then we'll dive in a little bit into McCall's impact fee analysis, the current one. And that covers the police department, the parks, and transportation. And also we'll look at stormwater. And then the last portion of this, we're hoping that our presentation is less than 15 minutes. We'll try to go fast because we really want to allow time for the council, and we've got some specific questions that we need direction on before we feel like we can proceed in this study. And then Colin's going to go over next steps and timeline. So just to give the council a background, for those of you that may not remember, the city of McCall actually did an impact fee study back in 2008. And this was specifically for the police department, parks, and transportation or streets. Ultimately, the study was completed, it was presented to council, and the council decided not to move forward with impact fees. And that was really kind of the result of the economic situation at the time when it rolled out. They just weren't ready to move forward with it. In 2018, when we did that comprehensive plan, which was basically 2016 to 2018 was the development of that plan with our community, it has a specific strategy that says conduct an impact fee study to assure adequate infrastructure and public services. So it's been on our to-do list for a while. We talked with the council about it numerous times, and I think you brought it up in your council retreats. Ultimately, in 2024, the impact fee was funded and it was started. We entered into a contract, and then we started the process, and then we got into all of the work associated with the impact area. And at that time, the decision was made to kind of basically put that project on hold so we could focus on the impact area and also kind of not confuse the issues of impact areas and impact fees. And so here we are back, picking the study back up. We've learned some things, and we wanted to share that with all of you tonight. So with that, I'm going to invite Colin, who's our consultant. I think you may have met him when we were doing contract development, but I'll let you do a brief introduction and let you get
thank
going.
you. Yeah. Good evening. Yeah, Colin McElweeny with Tishel Bice. I think I joined in on my cell phone about a year ago from an airport. And yeah, so to Michelle's point, we've kind of been working along a little bit. There were just some holdups with other higher priority items for the city, but on our end, we've been sort of working through and sort of at a point where we were hoping to get a little bit of direction by council on a couple of things. Tishel Bice Galena, I'm based in Boise, been doing impact fees in the state 10 years now, all throughout the state. That's just sort of a small smattering of our experience, but also importantly, where impact fees are in Idaho. I would have a list of maybe like 80 clients, and just to show sort of the need of impact fees, your sort of municipalities, counties, fire districts are really feeling the constraints of recent legislation by the state capitol on property tax. And so impact fees are just one, tool addressing one, capital infrastructure needs. So not necessarily a silver bullet when it comes to the overall sort of global need of municipal budgets, but does help solve some of those needs. So I have a couple of slides here just to sort of refresh folks on what impact fees are, just to make sure that we're all sort of understanding what we're talking about. So this is a one-time payment that new growth pays to offset their new demand on infrastructure. Typically, it's paid when the building permit is issued. It's not on existing homes, not on existing businesses. So it's really those new homes, small subdivisions, multifamily development businesses that are coming in, generating more traffic on your roads, police calls, fire calls, visitation to your parks. And so we have to expand that infrastructure to continue our levels of service. don't have the time to get too much into the weeds, but we have to provide this nexus study that hits on three things: need, benefit, and proportionality. So we need to see that you're growing and that you have a capital improvement plan that's growth related, and so there's a need to collect impact fees to fund that infrastructure. You have to ensure that there's a benefit with these dollars. State statute says you have to spend it within 8 years, and so we want to make sure that you have a capital improvement plan that meets that state statute, that we're not just stockpiling cash and don't have any plans for that, because we want to ensure that we're, in a sense, providing a benefit to the people that are paying the fee. If we're looking at large geographies, you might see service areas to make sure dollar collected in North County is spent in north of the county, and in South County spent in south of the county. In this case, geography of McCall is small enough that we don't have to sort of slice and dice the service area. And then lastly, the fee has to be proportionate. So you're going to see a handful of commercial types in the fee schedule, because retail is a different demand than office, which is different than industrial. Same on the residential side, and I'll present kind of two options. You can do a fee based on the type of home, so single family versus multifamily, or by the size of the home. We can show with local census data that smaller homes have less people, less trips on your roads, and so they should pay a proportionally less fee, smaller fee, compared to the larger homes that will ultimately bring in more folks. Really importantly, impact fees. This is for infrastructure, capital expansion, and importantly, expanding the capacity of your infrastructure. It's not for maintenance or repairs of existing infrastructure. We also can't hire more police officers with impact fees, just following state code. So it's really adding new infrastructure to the system. Got some examples here. So you have a rusty slide or a leaky roof. That wasn't because of the new folks that moved into town. That's a maintenance replace expense that should be funded through typically general fund. Any sort of net new amenity to a park would be 100% impact fee eligible, and then you're going to see some scenarios where there's sort of a mixture of funding sources. So if you're replacing something that's in the ground today, but adding capacity to that facility, that added capacity portion would be impact fee eligible. So 400 square foot playground goes to 600. That added 200 square feet, or 33%, could be funded with impact fees. A couple other things. These are dollars that are put into special revenue funds. They shouldn't go into your general fund. Have to be spent within 8 years. You also need to have an impact fee advisory committee, required to have a capital improvement plan, a CIP, which lists out where those dollars are going to go towards for the next 5 or 10 years. Helps justify collecting the fees and ensure that there's a plan for where those dollars are going. Have to update the studies themselves every 5 years. And we're also thinking about infrastructure that has a 10-year useful life or longer. So sometimes you might see like police cars in an impact fee program, but it really depends on if those police cars are being run more or less than 10 years. In this case, you're replacing your police vehicles less than 10 years, and so they wouldn't be impact fee eligible. Impact fee advisory committee, they play kind of two roles. They should be meeting once a year to look at the financials and flows of cash. If there's expenditures, that it's following the CIP and that it's an eligible expenditure with impact fees. But they'll also meet, once we get to a good part with the study, we'll meet with them a few times to ensure that they review the assumptions, growth assumptions, capital plans, levels of service, hopefully get a recommendation by them to move forward with the study. They have to be at least 5 folks that live within the city. You can have the planning and zoning, which is the case here, Planning and Zoning Commission, be your DFAC. Importantly, capital plans. These are 5 or 10-year plans that include those projects that at least at the time that at the time we're planning to fund with impact fees. It can be adjusted throughout the years, but it really is necessary with impact fees and helps us determine that we're collecting the right amount. One thing that's you'll see in these conversations here is parks, for example. There's multiple sort of components to a park impact fee. One being purchasing parkland, developing that parkland, raw land into active parkland, and then putting amenities onto that parkland. If we don't have plans to purchase land, for example, we shouldn't be collecting that sort of component of the fee. So we want to make sure that every element here is sort of lining up with each other. The study itself, I'd say we're kind of halfway through. First sort of element is looking at growth and putting together 10-year growth projections, sitting down with department staff to understand their levels of service and capital plans. There's different sort of methodologies that we have to go through with impact fees. There's also a need to evaluate credits, or if there's other revenues coming in. Going to these capital plans, we might reduce the impact fee to make sure that we're not overburdening growth, or that we're not double charging future residents. So if you're paying a full freight impact fee, but also, let's say, a sales tax or a property tax that's going to the same project, you should reduce the impact fee slightly, just to make sure that you're not double collecting for the same items. Go through advisory committee. We also need the capital improvement plans to be adopted into your comp plan. So there's a kind of a hurdle there that we have to get through. And then there's a public hearing to update your ordinance. Wanted to give an example of mountain towns collecting impact fees. Just kind of give you a sense of kind of where they're landing. You can see the sand points on the top there. Most of these are Idaho, but you do have one on there that's Whitefish. So this is for a single-family home of 2,000 square feet. So they can range, anywhere from, let's say, 7,000 to 12,000 per home. Now, sort of moving along, just so we can kind of get to the sort of discussion part of this presentation is, I wanted to present kind of, status of where we are with parks, police, transportation, stormwater, and also some recommendations by myself, but also staff. Importantly, when we're sort of thinking about putting in place an impact fee, we have to ensure that there's a nexus there, that there are growth-related costs that we can fund with impact fees that are within sort of that near term, within the 8 years. And so we're asking these questions with department heads, but also ensuring that there might be other revenue sources out there, and is that a better way to secure your capital plans? So for parks, this one seems the simplest. There's plenty of park needs out there. You have the PROS plan that identifies a number of projects. Working with Kurt on fine-tuning a 10-year plan on sort of what are the priorities that come from those PROS plans. Portions of those projects are growth-related. Some portion isn't growth-related, so working together to sort of put that in place. And as I mentioned, when we're thinking about park impact fees, we can add amenities to our parks. We can improve land that we have that is sort of raw land and sort of activate that with irrigation and utilities, even just sort of site prep there, and then purchasing of land. Importantly, I think as a team, we're going to look at all three of those, but the largest sort of cost component is going to be purchasing of land. Basically, we have to evaluate the cost of an acre of land in McCall, which is pricey, right? And so the impact fee is going to follow that. But what was the strategy here is to present those findings to council, and you'll see, okay, we'll get you a maximum supportable impact fee, and you'll be able to make that decision if you're support that or not, or if we should sort of remove some things to lower the fee. Another point too, just kind of an option out there, pretty unique to Idaho, but is assessing park impact fee on commercial development. What I know is just Sandpoint and Haley are doing this, and it's not a ton, but it does shift some of that cost from homes to the commercial, retail and office demand. And basically we show that there's an inflow of workers to McCall that are then recreating at your parks. And so they're sort of bringing in demand, and we can set a fee to that amount. And then, importantly too, is we don't want to, again, be sort of double collecting on development. And so if we adopted a park impact fee, this would actually sort of replace your existing park subdivision policy, the land dedication policy that you have, because we don't want to be requiring land, but then also collecting an impact fee to purchase land, right? There's a sort of double collection there. So our recommendation is actually to continue moving forward with that. It's a pretty easy win. There's also a priority in McCall for expanding our parks. So that's kind of my thought, is sort of moving forward with that. Police, similar, we have capital plans. We've been able to sort of understand sort of facility level of service. With police impact fees, we can expand the existing station or purchase a new station and expand off of that. Importantly, though, there's sort of a nuance here, is that the existing station is leased by the county. So there would be a commitment here by council, if you move forward with a park or a police impact fee, that you've started collecting dollars to expand a facility that you might not actually own. And so, or move that facility elsewhere, that police station elsewhere. But right now, I think it's about 4,000 square feet. The moving of that 4,000 square feet elsewhere would not be impact fee eligible. If that 4,000 became 6,000, the extra 2,000 would be impact fee eligible. So there is an obligation with these impact fees, if you adopt a police one, that within 8 years, you would be doing something. The important thing is, if you don't, the dollars have to be returned back to the property owner. So we want to make sure that there's plans there and commitment, because moving that existing police station would require other dollars. Predominantly, most of that would be coming from the general fund or a bond of some sort, but impact fees could play a role in that. I forgot to mention, we do have Kurt and Chief Palmer on. I wasn't sure, do either of you have comments on these items?
This is Kurt. No, you did a great job summarizing that, but happy to answer any questions the council may have if they have them.
Yeah, Council and Mayor, Chief Palmer, same. Thank you, Colin, for what you're sharing for us, and I'm here to answer any questions.
The next one, and probably the most complex one, is transportation. Transportation can be many forms. Road widenings, we're really ensuring sort of capacity expanding infrastructure here. So widening roads, adding a lane, extending that roadway, making intersection improvements, expanding the capacity there. Can include bike lanes or sidewalks, pathways. If we're thinking sort of moving people through town, not necessarily vehicles, but also a public works facility would be, similar to a police facility. We can collect impact fees to expand facilities, brick and mortar facilities associated with transportation needs. Couple of things to note here, though, when we were sort of working with staff, that there are needs, roadway needs, especially in sort of the eastern part of the city, but potentially the better way of accomplishing those roadways and right-of-way would be through sort of the negotiation entitlement process with the landowners there. The issue with impact fees is you sort of collect them as the rooftops are built, but with roads, you need the roads before the rooftops in some cases, right? And so through sort of that exaction process, you might be able to sort of get the roads in place first, so then the homes can be built. And I do have Nathan on. I think he'll be able to talk a little bit more about this. Pathways, very common one in a community like yours. But there's sort of a gray area here where staff is hoping to do a transportation master plan next year, which would better indicate those capital plans and priorities, which would feed into an impact fee study. And so kind of they're teetering on recommending waiting to do the pathways until that transportation plan is done next year. But we can, like I noted, use impact fees to sort of improve, expand upon our public works facility. Importantly, it's not making roof repairs or replacing out the HVAC. It would actually be expanding upon that facility or moving it. And so similar to the police discussion point is, if you start collecting a public works facility impact fee, you're committing yourself to doing something, and that might include other dollars coming in. And so there's sort of a level of sort of obligation there and commitment through those decisions. Nathan, are you on?
He's right behind you.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Thanks, Colin. Nathan Stewart, Public Works Director. So I guess I think we really tried to think hard about option number one. That's kind of the natural tendency to say, oh, well, we're going to build a new bypass around the city, or we need a new, some kind of facility for increased roads. In McCall, I think we're very cognizant about the idea of trying to minimize highways and things like that, but then also a lot of the extensions of those roads require new development, require potentially the state of Idaho to release land for development. And I think any of those areas where we see those expansions would likely require a developer to come in and be willing to front the cost to create that right of way. So I think we have a much better chance of getting significant assets, public assets for transportation through the entitlement process when we look at those expansions, as opposed to incrementally collecting some funds and then going and purchasing right of way for a proposed development that may never happen. Option two is viable, and we have a draft list, and we could move quickly on that if you really felt the necessity. The idea of expanding capacity in many respects is we have an existing road with no bike lanes or no sidewalk or no pathway. Colin has indicated if we interpret the rules liberally, we can say we're increasing capacity, not by adding vehicular lanes, but by adding those additional facilities. You already have a streets LOT, and that's been your principal tool to execute that. So there's some thought process there of, is it perceived by the community that you're double dipping there? What you don't have is a revenue source for future public works facilities. And so we thought hard once we started listening to what the police department was doing, is this applicable? And the good thing is it is. And Colin and I just met previous to this meeting, and we talked a little bit about it. He has in his hands our facility master plan. And we've talked as well about how that's a pricing scheme for the existing facility and also has some cost estimates for another facility somewhere else. But that comes with a pretty big caveat too, that the council has to be committed to supporting probably 2/3 to 3/4 of that cost through other methods and means, because we really need these impact fees to be focused on the expanded capacity of that facility. And you're gonna face that with the police department or the public works facility. So happy to answer any questions. That's my spiel.
Yeah. And there one more slide after this, I think, just kind of summarizes those discussion points to sort of open it up for council discussion. So, stormwater is, if you looked at that list in state statute, is listed there as sort of impact fee eligible infrastructure. It's very rare. I actually don't know if there might be one city that's collecting a stormwater impact fee, because the issues when it comes to stormwater infrastructure, one being is that there tends to be a lot of deficiencies in the system, and we can't use impact fees to address deficiencies in the system. But also if you have development standards in place where new commercial space, new subdivision is mitigating their stormwater on site, then you wouldn't, then they wouldn't pay an impact fee because they're doing that improvement in lieu of paying the impact fee. And so at least at this time, we're recommending not moving forward with a stormwater impact fee. A sort of more successful scenario would be cities doing stormwater utility, where that's, let's say $100 a year, every property pays that, is assessed that, and that goes into sort of that operation and maintenance component, addressing those deficiencies within the system. Maybe a couple more slides. So kind of moving from kind of this global analysis of sort of different components, different chapters of the program would be how we assess the fees, especially on the residential side. So just gave a sort of rough breakdown of kind of what residential fees look like, or the structure of that. Usually sort of single-family, multifamily, maybe even single-family detached, single-family attached, and then multifamily being apartments and condos, or by the square footage of the home. So we'd sort of start around the 1,000 square foot mark and then increase, up to 5,000, let's say. And the thing with this sort of structured by the square footage, again, is we can show and we have the data that there's less people per home in those smaller homes on average in McCall. And so there's less, visitation to parks if you have less people in that household, less traffic on the roads, less calls to the police department. And so their fee would be proportionally less than the larger homes. And it's usually, maybe the smallest homes are paying a third of the fee compared to the largest of homes. We definitely see this in a lot of our resort communities, just because there's kind of this bifurcation of sort of the housing market, right? But we're also seeing it, Caldwell's looking at, Boise has it, Meridian has it, Idaho Falls has it. So it is becoming even more popular and just sort of around the state, but also the country, of a way of ensuring a bit more equity in these fee schedules, because the issue with sort of single family and multifamily is the 8,000 square foot single family home would pay the same fee as the 1,200 square foot single family home, right? But they very different values in pricing, but also different demand too that we can show. So typically, we go to more the residential fee structure by size of home. Also on the right-hand side too, you can see different residential land uses that we typically include: retail, office, industrial, institutional, which is healthcare and education, and lodging as well. So kind of an example there, and I think we're hoping to get direction by council a little bit on that. So couple of things here, just sort of summarizing slides I went really quickly through. But on the park side, want to get the temperature by council on even just exploring what a commercial park impact fee might look like. Importantly, the big sort of topic with police and public works is the council willing to make that commitment of other dollars, general fund dollars, in these cases of a public works facility expansion or police facility expansion. Preferences when it comes to the transportation impact fee sort of components there, and then any sort of temperature on the progressive fee schedule for residential. Next steps, with direction from tonight, we're just sort of finishing up fine-tuning some of those CIPs with departments. Going to present to the advisory committee, get their input as well, sort of finalize that report, and present maximum supportive fee amounts to the council, and we can sort of work through maybe different iterations if there's, if you want to see a couple different sort of scenarios. Only a few months out, I think, especially like police and parks, we're kind of near the finish line, at least from the analysis standpoint, and same with public works as well. So we're nearing there. So hopefully by the end of spring, we should have a finalized report to you.
Before the next development season.
Yes, yeah.
So if we could just go back to the discussion. These were the 4 questions that we have for the council. If we want to take them one by one, and Colby, I don't know, or Mayor Nielsen, if you want to lead this discussion, or if you want staff to.
Sure, we can just check in with the council here. Does anyone have any questions outside of the discussion direction on that presentation?
I have one, maybe. When we look at one of our greatest needs is workforce housing, and think of land banking. And is land banking, if you have a project in mind, a possibility of impact fees?
For affordable housing specifically, unfortunately, no. Just sort of following what's allowed under state statute. Yeah, at least with impact fees. Yeah.
So that's something that we have been talking with our attorney about and exploring. So there might be options to, if we have a project, for example, that has local housing, maybe rather than exempt, we can basically have a fund that pays into the impact fees so that it's not impacting the final cost of that unit. So those are things that I think we'll need to explore in the implementation section once we get there, but that's been in our mind. I think the reality of sort of our economy right now is that, like, generally speaking, these units aren't, they're, local housing's happening as part of sort of larger developments. It's a small percentage, so I think we want to look at that, but most of the home construction that we see are sort of unattainable or unaffordable to our residents. So
I'd have one more. Then, in kind of a guiding philosophy, when we think of the cost of growth to an area, and we know what impact fees are eligible for, and there are other costs that the community absorbs because of growth that aren't eligible. So the total costs aren't recovered just through impact fees, which would lead me to say, what's the strategy in determining the amount of impact fee you want from the community? Do you want to try and recover, allocate impact fees that cover as many costs as you can identify that are legitimate, of course? Or do you want to somehow think of other factors? Well, impact fees ultimately get passed on to the home buyer or to the builder of affordable accommodations for rent. So how do you normally advise communities to proceed, to think about, identify every cost you can and get that amount of money, or there's a balance in there?
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this for hours, right?
Okay, then I didn't mean to start
no.
that way.
But what you'll see in the impact fee studies when we sort of present the analysis is, like for parks, for example, that's an easy one. Is we quantify in dollars the current level of service. So how many park acres you have per 1,000 residents, how many park amenities you have per 1,000 residents. Then bring that into dollars of, okay, what is the cost to construct those types, right? And then we show the maximum, and that maximum, in a sense, is the cost to serve a new resident coming in, infrastructure-wise, right? We're not even talking about a larger pot of operations. And so showing that number, what it might be, $4,000 per home, adoption below that maximum would mean that you're collecting an impact fee that's lower than the current level of service. So the hypothesis, right, would then be that your levels of service are going to go down over time, or you'd have to raise other revenues to shore up that gap.
Thanks. I understand that a little bit. I was just thinking, we've identified 4 or 5 things. Should we be looking for 6, 7, and 8? That also, instead of being at 10,000, that maybe where we're Sandpoint, where McCall comes in at the middle of that list of cities. Or do we want to come in like somewhere where Sandpoint identified it and say we're at $12,000 per unit because we also have 5, 6, and 7 on our list?
I think you're jumping ahead to probably the next work session when we actually present the fees and we talk about the impacts. But I think you bring up a good point, because that's the policy discussion around, are you implementing 100% of the cost? And keep in mind, impact fees are, new development is paying for the impact on the community, right? So as opposed to having your residents that it sort of subsidize that process. And so I think being really clear about what they do and how much of that you want to either have them take on or have the community take on, that'll be, I feel like we're jumping ahead, but
Okay.
those are all really good questions.
I get it, okay.
Should we start with question 1 then? Let's
Yeah,
do
that'd be
that.
great. I want to keep us rolling.
Yeah.
We have a lot of stuff to do.
And just to add, we did this in Sandpoint maybe 6 months ago, is I showed, like, either during, public hearing or work session, is okay, here's what the fee would be if it was just residential. And then here would be the fee for if we assessed it on commercial. I don't necessarily want to say this is sort of the end all be all decision here. But it's just important, this would be unique to Idaho. And just, assessing a park impact fee on commercial would be increasing those costs of building on commercial. Yeah.
Can I just have a question on how commercial works. I mean, so is it just if someone comes in and builds a new building, a commercial space? Or is it change in business? For instance, we have the Pancake House and now it's a grocery store.
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's, and this is a little bit of a policy decision, but a lot of communities like yours do this where a good example would be like a warehouse that's turned into a brewery, right? Is that warehouse actually has a pretty relatively low impact when we're thinking about, on our services compared to a restaurant. And so redevelopment of that site, changing the use to a higher impact, you could charge the net increase. Yeah. So, and same with housing too. If there's a 1,000 square foot home there today that gets bulldozed and replaced with a 5,000 square foot home, under that sort of square footage scenario, you could charge for that sort of delta in increase in demand.
Can you charge a delta for remodels? Like if someone, takes a 1,200 square foot house and adds another
Well,
3,000 square feet?
Another policy decision, but I know Bozeman does that, because the argument is that, okay, you're adding 2 more bedrooms, right? And so now that can, hold 8 people instead of 3 people before. And Bozeman's approach is, I even call it the Bozeman approach, because their fees are very high too, but they're saying we want to capture every single cost, and that includes remodels of going, to the higher square footage homes. Yeah.
I guess a question along those lines and is with I saw lodging listed on there, and same thing, is that for a new facility, or is that for something that converts into a primary lodging facility, say a short-term vacation rental?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Long story, yes. Or short story, yes. Long story is like on the resident or on the lodging side. I don't know if I said it or not, but usually it's like per room. So 20 room hotel or motel, would get assessed, $5,000 per room, would 20 times that amount. I guess let's say standalone single family home turned into let's just call it a B&B, right? And now there's a different use. We're going from a residential use to a hotel, lodging sort of thing, and there could be a delta there in some scenarios where you could charge an additional fee. But whatever sort of exists today is kind of like that baseline, and so it'd just be sort of that net increase.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I would say that, if the council decides that you want us to move forward with the commercial assessment, we could kind of bring some of those different policy concepts and then try to link them with, existing adopted goals and plans. So you can kind of see how that would work. I think the question is do you want us to look into the commercial assessment?
And this is specifically for the
For
parks. And does it apply to the other?
I should have alluded to that as like police, transportation would be on residential and non-residential. Yeah, that would be for all development. And so what you would see typically is parks is only for residential growth, but you can sort of make the nexus that new employment in the city is generating demand on your parks.
What's the council's thoughts on that?
I think
For
that's
parks,
really
as far
wise.
as
I think
parks
our parks are under
specifically.
pressure, and number one, definitely yes for me.
I'm a yes.
Yeah, I don't see why not give us the information. I mean, we may or may not want to do that in the end, but I think it'd be good to keep going with that.
Good with that? I think we all would like to see what it looks like at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And similarly, I hate to sort of like end discussions before showing the results, but for like this, for the police and the public works facilities, we can show kind of what that revenue looks like over 10 years based on sort of facility level of service. It would just be even just sort of priming the pump here of the city council understanding what the obligations are coming along with that. So maybe, unless there's meaningful discussion to have now about that, that could be something that we just present to you and you make that decision later.
How do you guys feel about that? I think we've had discussions on Well, I know we've had discussions on both of those facilities and the need to address them. Just, would you
Yeah.
like to discuss it at the next touch on this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like Julie's comment. Next touch, we can, if we have the information, we can help decide.
Can I ask a question about this? Is expansion measured just as square foot of the building, like in the case of the police department, and for public works, maybe square foot of office space and number of vehicle bays, or are there different ways to measure?
There could be different ways, yeah. I mean,
Uh-huh.
for police, I've seen this where, like I know Napa did this, where they reorganized just like the police admin space, right? To, I think, allow for more offices, right, more desks. And it wasn't a big number. I mean, just a few $1,000s, but they made the case that we're hiring more folks, we need more offices, and so the floor space isn't expanding, but there's sort of remodeling there. On public works, there could be other expansions that aren't just brick and mortar, like covering of materials, shelters, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so that it's not necessarily sort of end all be all, but you are going to be generating, several $1 million of revenue in both categories. And so in both cases, there's probably going to be something substantial that would have to be put in place.
Yeah. What, like, for example, in the police station situation, it's a office building with no covered or enclosed vehicle parking. Would covered vehicle parking be an expansion?
Yeah.
In that case?
Yeah. And just the, caveat being making the expansions, maybe on a property you don't own.
Yeah.
Would be,
Right.
because the, just kind of like long-term, long-term, impact fee, right, point of view is that, if you make those, improvements at that site, 15 years go down the road and you move from that site, you sort of have to pick up and leave, and now you're the general fund obligation is even greater. If that makes sense, because now we're saying, okay, it was the 4,000 square feet, then we made $2 million of improvements. Now I have to pick that and put it elsewhere.
You're like setting
without-
your cost basis higher.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the way you worded the question too, I would say, yes, we're interested in getting briefs some more. Seems like a real attractive approach, and council's discussed both those facilities. And our goal long-term, like in the next 10 years, we'd like to own a police station, not pay rent. And we would like to have a public works facility that's in the right location. So that means commitment on our part, and I like the way you worded it, but my thoughts as one member would be, yes.
Yeah, the clock starts ticking, which would ensure a decision. Right.
I'm a yes on number 2.
Good on that?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the transportation impact fee. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's more multi-part question here.
There's 3 parts to it. The first part is, are you comfortable not including the street improvements and basically using our current model, which is negotiating those through the entitlement process?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
That makes sense to me.
Great, okay. The second one is about, should we include pathways and sidewalks within the transportation impact fee?
Yes,
Yes.
it's a great idea, and for the reasons that you explained. We are increasing capacity, especially during the summer months. We have bike lanes.
And I guess it should also be added that the committee looks at the fee every year and it can be modified based on new plan information too.
Yeah.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So when the fees are they set by ordinance, or are they set by resolution referencing the ordinance?
Usually, unfortunately, I've seen them both ways.
So I guess because, if you change those fees, then you have to do a whole new ordinance. So if you change those fees, do you have to do a public hearing anyway? Or,
Great question. So, and there's elements, that we'll discuss later, but one thing you can do in your ordinance is include an inflationary factor. So every year, based on this construction cost index, it could, in the interim years of those 5 years, sort of increase. I think communities that have done that, it's easier for them to adopt the fees by resolution. Now, the state statute says if the fees have increased by more than 5%, you have to have a public hearing. So both ways?
So we can do it by
Yeah.
resolution,
Yeah.
so then if we change, so if there's a need to change those fees in the future, all you have to do is resolution, and you don't have to do a whole new ordinance.
Right, right. I didn't pass the bar, so this is not legal advice.
Right, I was just, I know there's
Our friends at White
different
Peterson
rules
will,
with
yeah.
different- with
Yeah.
the impact fee, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's true with most fees.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure it's true with that fee
Yeah.
too.
And I think the third part you already answered,
Yeah,
Yep,
Yeah.
that's good.
to at least explore that
Yeah.
and bring that information to you.
So I have a question in regards to facilities and the 2 facilities that we need. If we were to identify a site that would be able to facilitate both facilities, would they necessarily need to be independent impact fees or?
oh, well, both impact fee funds could fund that joint facility.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's also not just brick and mortar, but like engineering plans, site prep of that new site, anything that's needed to sort of put feet under it.
And then number 4, the progressive residential fee structure seems pretty reasonable. Do we have?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have a small structure and someone getting a smaller home, paying as much as a larger home. I like Lyle's suggestion that if there's some way to take into account deed restricted property, that would be great. It's sort of almost an incentive and on top of our incentives already. But
We'll definitely look into that.
Is the question whether you could exempt like deed restricted properties from?
Yeah,
The
I don't
fees
want to go
or-
into that just because we're running out of
Yeah.
time, but yeah, we have already started to explore that a little bit, and then when we get to kind of the next phase, we'll have more information on how we want to treat local housing, affordable housing, all of those kinds of things.
So what I got out of your slide deck was the most fair and equitable way is like square footage as an example. So if that's what's in that question, I think that's important that we pick up on that and follow through.
Yeah, really the biggest con I see is actually on the administration of that. Looking at the clerk maybe, or planning staff, because it's
Our
not.
building department.
Yeah, building, yeah, right.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, like a single family
We have to
home.
calculate fees all the time.
Yeah,
It's not that
yeah,
hard.
single family home is
Yeah.
fine, right? But if it's a 20-unit apartment building, you'd have to get the square footage of each of the 20 units. So there's a little bit more legwork there, but I think, in my opinion, the pros outweigh the one con.
I like that, and I think that integrating into Colby's short-term rental, and is there a variation in fee as that home fluctuates between residence and commercial?
Well,
I didn't mean for
I don't know
answer.
that we wanna get into
that might be a
that.
grander,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
I
another
just meant
discussion.
that we have that in
That
mind.
was more of a political question.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
Yeah,
answer to
no,
it.
it's political, legal, and that, but I still
Yeah.
think we
Exactly.
should have some input to that when
Oh,
we
yeah.
look at it again.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so if someone changes a short-term rental back to a family home, do they get some of those fees back?
Yeah, I
It's a
mean, I
complicated-
think
that's-
that's, with the commercial, a lot of that stuff will become clear, is like what triggers in the change of use would impact fees be collected. I think we got an idea that maybe you look slightly outside the narrow scope of commercial, or like.
Yeah, I mean, you're in McCall is like, maybe not unique, because there's other examples like McCall that I'm referencing to, but unique to, just, coming from the Treasure Valley, right, suburban development, right? That's not what you're seeing. You're seeing these infills and stuff like that. And so, there'd be more variations to kind of your ordinance and policies compared to Meridian or NAMFA. Yeah.
And on the commercial side, is there any kind of distinctions between, like, say you have retail, or just thinking of a grocery store, and a mom and pop shop, little maybe deli specialty store versus, another grocery store coming in? I mean, is there a way to?
That's a great question. I don't know how much time I have, but the thought, at least with like retail big umbrella, being that like a barbershop comes in and is replaced by, I don't know, a tax person or replaced by a flower boutique, is that at least we've sort of captured it there. ACHD, Ada County Highway District, has a laundry list of commercial land uses in there. I think sometimes that actually kind of muddies the water a little bit because there's so much variation that, well, I'm a laser tag operator. You're not listed that on this like laundry list, right? Where do I fit in? Where if you kept it broader, you can kind of catch all of that. If that makes sense.
I guess I was just kind of seeing as like I wouldn't want to burden local businesses or smaller businesses coming in, compared to, the larger things. I mean, we don't have a huge amount of large buildings or anything like that, but, that would just be the concern.
And I think if we do the commercial assessment, we can go ahead and go through like our policy documents and see, kind of like bring those points up, like how is this going to impact the small business and how would it work and that sort of thing. I think those are all really important things to look at before any implementation or decision making happens.
All right, anything else? We went a little bit over our 15 minutes.
Yeah, I know. So that's a wrap. I think we got really clear direction on what we needed, so that was really helpful. And we will be back kind of in the next phase of the study. More information and more discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
And more analysis,
Yeah, a lot more numbers to come.
Yeah.
I think that was a very helpful intro to it, and we'll be ready for the next touch.
Yeah, we're nearly there. Yeah, we're just finishing up. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
All right, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Bree is up next.
Do you want me to stretch or anything?
We'll keep her
It was
rolling.
only an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
We usually go at least 3 hours before we need a break.
Yeah, I guess this is old hat for you guys.
So we're gonna review the local housing action plan and overview for the proposed McCall Avenue ground lease. Is the agenda item.
Is there something I need to do other than just plug it in?
The best is to join the meeting. And then just mute your speaker. And then just share your screen. And then, you're muted, so I think you're great.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So I think you go in
Oh,
there.
I think I want this one.
Yeah. So can you mute this? There. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Sure, perfect. All right, get rid of that. Open that. Minimize that. All right, there we go. All right. Hello all. Today I'll be discussing the local housing action plan and proposing updates to the McCall ground lease to better align with this 2022 plan. Oh, sorry. It's Bree Zach, Housing Program Manager. In proposing updates to the McCall Avenue ground lease to better align with this 2022 plan, which is the guiding document for my work. For context, McCall Avenue home is currently under contract and the buyer is hoping to close on February 13th. I'm bringing these proposed changes forward right now so we can discuss them, come to a consensus, and if possible, approve and update the lease in the next council meeting. Legal has already read this and approved the updates thus far. And these updates will only apply to the new ground lease for the pending sale.
In accordance to the current leases, though, if it is improved, I will share the updated lease with all of the owners at McCall Avenue, and they'll have the option to adopt it if they want. They don't have to, totally up to them. Yeah. So additionally, I wanted to share that the major proposed updates with the buyer, I have shared the major proposed updates already with the buyer, and they didn't seem to have any issue with them so far, but I have not sent them the entirety of the lease because I'm having this discussion with you all and I might change it. So yes, so I just want to let you all know, and at this time, I already have confirmation that they are qualified for the $1 subsidy, whether we update it via the stuff I'm going to show you tonight, or if we leave it the same as the 2009 lease. All right, so I'm going to start by reviewing the Local Housing Action Plan local housing definition. It says that dwellings of all types, those live and or work in the McCall area can afford to purchase or rent, serving the entire spectrum of the housing needs that are not being met by the housing market. So there are three major goals outlined in the Local Housing Action Plan as found on page 4. The first goal discusses income and who should be targeted by the city's housing program. It focuses on the incomes not being met by the current housing market, and this includes rental opportunities for households earning up to 100% area median income, which in 2022 was $60,000 per year, and ownership opportunities for households earning up to 150% AMI, which at that time was $100,000 per year. Since 2022, the federally reported AMI numbers have gone up significantly, I'm sure you all are aware, likely due to the rise of remote workers moving to McCall. So now 150% of the AMI is now closer to 150,000, which likely doesn't reflect of the incomes of local employees. The second goal is to produce 50 local housing units per year. Unfortunately, we're definitely a little bit behind on this goal, but we're starting to make some strides towards it by adding 2 new deed-restricted homes since this plan was launched in 2022, and those are the totally completed. As you all know, we have a bunch of in the pipeline, so that's really exciting. But as there are only 24 completely restricted homes of our 4,292 existing McCall homes, or just 0.5% of the overall McCall housing stock, this emphasizes the need to really protect our currently restricted local homes and keep them available for locals going forward. This is also why we're looking to update this lease. The third goal is to increase local occupancy of homes from 27% to 40%. We're still working to grow at this. Now to talk about the ground lease updates. The ground lease is a historic document. And since it was first drafted in 2006 and updated last in 2009, housing programs, policy, and the environment we all operate in have changed dramatically, but the intent remains the same. As a brief history of these ground leased homes is the land was donated to the city in 2006, specifically for local housing. The first ground lease was drafted that same year, included income restrictions and appreciation caps intended to keep the homes affordable long-term. The homes were completed and listed in mid-2007s, but only 2 sold in that first 2 years. This was partly due to lenders being hesitant to finance homes with these restrictions that were very uncommon at the time. Luckily, they're a lot more common now. And then the broader housing market of 2008, 2009. In 2009, the banks nearly foreclosed on 6 of the 9 homes. And instead of foreclosing, though, the banks granted an extension, the city removed the income restriction and price caps and created the lease that stands today. The updated lease I'm presenting are not intended to return totally to the 2006 lease, but instead focus on clarifying the language, old language, and bringing the lease kind of current to maintain the intent. So with any update, there are, of course, the few basic changes that materially don't affect the content, such as updating names, refining legal terminology, and there's the more substantive updates. So I just threw that up there, telling you I changed a few things, but I will go directly through all the substantial changes. So this next section will be a little more interactive. I'll show you the exact language changes highlighted in red on the screen. For the few of the topics, there's some additional slides that build on that same section. So I'll ask, we hold questions until I complete those, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So here's the first example. Just added some dates so that we knew when this language was written, and unfortunately, still 20 years later, we're still experiencing rising land prices and construction cost and housing unaffordability. All right, so here's our first major update, to the definition of a full-time employee. We added some clarifying language to what it means to work in Valley or Adams County. So an employee is working for a Valley or Adams County employer, primarily serving Valley or Adams County. And remote workers or other work from home do not qualify as local full-time employees. So why do we want to add this new language? We updated this definition to match the terminology across our housing programs. So this is like our deed restriction right now. And then also to help align it with the local housing action plan. So on page 18, the plan notes that in rising and high-cost housing markets, deed restrictions, I know we're talking about a ground lease, but often include limitations on occupancy, income levels, and rent or resale price to retain affordability. We also clarified that remote work does not qualify, as is commonly excluded from workforce housing programs. And I wanted to spend the next few moments kind of digging into that a little bit more. So I want to start off first with some pros of remote work. I've actually done remote work, so I'm very familiar with it. And some major benefits for it is it can strengthen the year-round community, especially of our higher cost communities, because more working age residents can move in and live and be part of the community. It can also bring in a more diverse skill set than the local job market demands. Remote schedules can be more flexible, which may allow people to be able to serve on boards and volunteer, where the normal 9-to-5 person won't have those same opportunities. It can also provide access to higher salaries and expanded career opportunities. And it can also increase your buying power and improve access to the housing market, allowing households to better compete in the open market and especially in our desirable community. So while remote work can be super beneficial for many reasons, remote work is almost always excluded from workforce housing programs because they typically can compete in the open market. Regular market. And many communities exclude the remote work from their eligibility criteria, including Blaine County, Summit County, Colorado, Jackson, Teton County, Aspen, Pitkin County, Whistler, and many others. I've yet to come across any restrictions that allow remote work. And here's why. Remote work often pays more than local wages, which can push housing prices up. One indicator of a higher earning remote workers entering our local community is the change in McCall's median household income, which increased from about $50,000 in 2015 to $104,000 in 2025. These higher earning remote workers can often make larger bids and outcompete local workers, especially in smaller, more desirable communities like ours. Their also higher willingness to pay can also set an inflated baseline for what the market can bear, driving both rental and sale prices up for local employees. In addition, with greater financial flexibility, some remote workers have substantial ability to make bigger upgrades and can effectively convert attainable homes into luxury homes and push those homes out of reach for local buyers. A Bureau of Labor Statistics study found that housing prices rose 24% from November 2019 to November 2021, with remote work contributing to more than 60% of that increase. Housing programs also generally just have limited resources. So subsidizing higher income remote working households can reduce the opportunities for other lower paid employees who cannot generally access the market. In McCall, only 9 out of the 4,292 housing units are ground leased homes. So that's 0.2% of the market. So, yeah. All right. made it through the first little bit. Now I want to open up for discussion. Do you guys have any questions, discussion points with this first change? This is like the biggest one, by the way, so it's not going to be as crazy.
So do we want to run through the changes how many more?
There's quite a few more. I didn't know if you guys want, I can keep going along and we can come back if you'd like, or it's up to you all.
What do you guys think? I feel like we might be able to hold questions. till
Hold
the end.
questions and keep going. That's
Yeah.
what I think.
Okay,
I think
sounds great. We'll keep plugging away then.
Take notes.
Yes, please do. Okay. All right, to our next update. So while we value supporting seniors, our resources are limited, as mentioned before, and we updated this definition to prioritizing helping local residents age in place rather than subsidizing low-cost retirement housing for seniors relocating into the community. I'll give you guys a second to read it if you'd like. Let me know when you all are ready. All right, looks like people are ready. Oh, and especially with that definition, we focused on the timeline that residents have been in McCall for local seniors without paying that land rent. The 10-year and 5-year timelines I actually borrowed from when I was in Blaine County, and we had a lot of discussion about what that should look like, and we brought it through a lot of legal considerations, and that's what we ended up settling on. I've also seen it used in multiple other communities. And then same thing with person with disability slide. I updated the language to be more person-centric, so it's person with a disability. And then once again, resources are limited, so we want to really prioritize helping those who have disabilities in our community already be able to stay in our community, and we want to be able to support them. And then this one is just updating the local employer to match the local employee definition. So there's just a couple little changes in there for that one. And then there's a few phrases we removed. One was to be the former spouse of such employee, senior, disabled person, or dependent. It was kind of just a messy clause, and we think that this would be better to just address on a case-by-case circumstance instead of just having it built into the lease. And then the second clause I removed because it's kind of a historically discriminatory phrase, and we want to remove it from any of our documents. Let me know if I already move on. Okay. And then this language clarifies and updates provisions that were not quite accurate previously. So a licensed Idaho real estate broker is actually doesn't have the training or certifications to be doing an appraisal, a land appraisal. So adjusted this accordingly. Okay. Oh, I guess I'll go back on that. Wait. Okay, and then I added this section so we don't have to pay for a new appraisal every year somebody's out of compliance. This matches our deed restriction. And because if we paid for a land appraisal every year, it'd likely negate the whole cost of the land rent we receive. It mirrors our deed restriction appreciation calculations and other housing programs, and it actually tends to be an underestimate of land value. So they'll probably get a better deal for 5 years. And then the legal team added this language to put a timeline on the appraisal process if the homeowner disagrees with the land valuation, just kind of trying to pull it all in so it doesn't extend out for a long time. And technically, in the current ground lease, households could short-term rent as long as the main household lives in the home 9 out of 12 months. So we just wanted to clean this up and put it very blatantly straightforward that no short-term rentals were allowed. And then we added some language at the end stating that the lease, when it changes ownership, will be updated to align with housing policies. While we do our best to capture the requirements in the lease, we cannot always predict future conditions or anticipate every issue that may arise. So this is just mostly a reminder to people, and it would not affect that owner or any other current landowner because they already have their lease signed. All right, I guess maybe I'll go back before I go through that. I'll open it up for questions.
Bree, if I could just
Yeah,
add
yeah.
one thing, I just wanted to emphasize to the council, you probably picked up on it because she said it at the beginning of the meeting, but basically updating or amending the lease is a voluntary process. So it's up to the owner and the buyer would agree to the terms. And I think what Bree's trying to do is, we know that this language was developed 20 years ago with sort of an intent, and is trying to clear that up. And as these properties turn over, if the property owners are willing to amend the ground lease, then that's the opportunity to do it. It doesn't force any existing owner to change the terms of their existing lease. So I just wanted to make that extremely clear, that this isn't something we're pushing on anybody, that it's a voluntary process. And again, our goal is to try to get consistent language across our policies and updated language.
So it's voluntary, number one, and it only, in this case, this year so far, it only affects one home because it's under contract. And our legal team has approved it, and the buyer is willing to take on those conditions for that one home.
As far as we know, I've run it by them a couple times, but I need to for sure send them the whole thing again for their review. But I haven't had like their stamp of approval on the entire thing yet. But for the proposed changes,
Yeah, it's
they're good.
conceptually, that new owner seems open to these and would still qualify under the new terms of this lease. And, but yeah, the specific lease language hasn't been presented and developed, partly because Bree wanted to get some feedback and direction on this before we move forward.
I had a quick question. I think it was on the slide about the definition of seniors. It referenced the McCall area. Is that defined anywhere?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
defined earlier in the lease.
So on the voluntary, what we're talking about though is that and I didn't go through the provisions in the B2 lease of the ability to change the lease like we did prior, like in 2009. We amended and restated, which was B1. We have the ability as the city to change the lease prior to issuing a new lease. At which point in time, if we decide to change the lease is being terminated for sale and a new person is, we have the ability to make changes to that lease, which we are then imposing on the new buyer, correct? So it's not voluntary.
It is. The new buyer could reject them.
Is that the way the lease is written?
It is. Yeah. Yeah, they could reject it and we could go back and forth and talk to them about it. And then if it was holding up everything, we could always have them sign the old lease.
Okay, so we are talking about voluntary, this version 3,
Yes.
we're talking about would be voluntary for anybody at the change. And it would also be then notice to everybody else, if you wanted to change your lease to this one, then voluntarily you
Yes.
could choose to. One hole that I see would be the issue of down the road, that we would need to have some clarity that this, say if it's this version 3, so V3 would need to stay for everybody. We can't have a V3, a V4, a V5 for different properties.
Yeah,
That would
so
be quite confusing and
Yeah.
arbitrary and probably not hold up in court.
yeah, well, it's an individual like agreement with a person or an entity, so it should hold up in court, even though if there's different ones. Because like for example, there was one ground lease that was sitting, and it was actually the V1 for
Still in
a number of
place.
years. Yeah, Yeah, because the V2 didn't come out until 2009.
Right.
So it was standing for a really long time. So there could
Right,
be
so
other.
if you bought at the outset, you're still on that initial lease.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But then post 2009,
Mm-hmm.
you're on that lease. If somebody prior in the version 1 sells their property, they're going to be on V2.
No, V3. If they were. Oh wait, sorry. Continue.
Right? So I want to make sure that we're not doing something confusing and that's not well thought out. The first lease wasn't well thought out. Nobody ever consulted lenders when it was done, or they missed certain parts with the lenders. So we had to go back to USDA, FHA, and make sure that the lease would comply so you could get a loan. 'Cause it doesn't really make sense to not be able to get an FHA loan on a workforce housing. So the concern then is so that where the language is in the lease is that if somebody in this property is still on V1 because they've owned the property since then, it can't be changed on them. They signed the lease. Now we've got the V2, and there's other people that have the V2 that have had the property since say 2011 or 2015 or something like this. Now we're talking about V3. So are we talking about then if somebody buys, if we do this V3 on this particular sale, now the person that has V1, when they sell that, they're going to be subject to V3. Right?
Only if they agree
Only if
Still
they
to
agree.
change.
But the language is still voluntary
Yeah.
to the.
I do have a question.
So-
Can you go to the last
It's
slide that you
voluntary
showed
for them
in
to
here?
sign that lease. So there's no.
That they
don't-
wouldn't buy it, so that,
Voluntary meaning they don't have to sign the lease, which means they don't get the property.
that's
No.
my understanding, yes, so that's the way it happened historically, so when a
Yeah, because you've
V1.
administered them.
Yeah, so when the V1 first changed, we had 2 houses under V1 when we went to V2, right? And so every house that purchased after that was V2. When the 2 houses that were under V1, they automatically had to sign the V2 lease.
Yes,
And so or they can't buy the house.
right.
And so I think that's the intent with V3. The voluntary part is, as it is now, if they don't like the lease, then they don't buy the house.
Right.
Now, the other voluntary piece is, as it was before, the current leaseholders have the choice that they can then go to V3 if they choose to, but
Right.
they are not required.
Right.
Only the new buyers are
Right.
required, so to speak. It's the lease that's being offered.
Yeah, so I'm not the attorney, but legally, voluntary is a bit of a loose word when we're saying voluntary means you don't have to buy it.
Right,
That's not voluntary.
right.
So, yeah, so the concern on this is if, and just so that we're clear, is that if we move to V3, then V3 becomes the new lease for McCall Avenue Homes, and if someone's buying or selling, the new buyer is going to be signing V3,
Well, technically.
which is what's presented in our packet for next week.
Yeah. Well, technically, if the new buyer wasn't wanting to sign it, but they were willing to sign the old one, the current owner could demand that we have used the last one. So it's like all 3 parties have to agree. So like there would have to be some conversation in that.
So the seller has to agree?
Yeah. My understanding from
Because
legal
it wasn't
advice.
that way before, but things
Okay.
change and legal
Yeah.
changes and it
That's
was,
So-
we just got new leases and,
Maybe we could ask Bill to join the conversation at this point to add
that'd
some
be
clarity
great.
here.
Yeah, good.
I forgot he was online.
Yeah, no problem. I'm mostly here for the next thing coming up, but
But have you reviewed this one?
yeah, a while back. So my understanding is we're trying to update these leases, and so we're trying to catch them as they sell, and having the purchasers voluntarily submit to the new lease as opposed to the old lease, and they have to be under the lease that's existing, but we're asking them to voluntarily update. And I think we had a similar conversation about this a while back, which is, and to address the comment that was made at the beginning of the meeting, I mean, we can't change those leases with the current owners.
Correct.
But when there's a change of hands, that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, this lease is more updated and in the better interest of the community. Can we negotiate this in?
But the V2 was not voluntary.
The change from V1 to V2.
Yeah, so Bill, just for clarity then, basically moving forward, if we decide to make these changes to the lease and this current pending sale goes through and the new buyers sign this new lease, every other time another McCall Avenue home sells, it's going to be subject to the V3, this latest amended.
Not another home, just this one.
Right, but what happens if the home next door goes on the market next week and then is under contract to close after this one does? What
Then
happens to that?
Then we'll try to update that lease too.
I'm confused.
So Mike, I mean, I think you're.
They have to
So,
voluntarily agree to change the lease.
Historically, they didn't have to. I don't know what changed, but I've been administering these leases through all of these changes.
Yeah.
And each time because we've had 3 different, so even though this is, we're on V2,
Right.
it's really the 3rd version,
Right.
because we had the ground lease, and then
And
we
then
had
the amended
version 1, and then we
restated, yeah.
had version 2. And each time that we changed, and each time the house sold, then we just went with the newest
Yes.
lease. But I am not legal, he is legal, and so we go with what Bill says.
I'm trying to think about how best to express this. We asked and they agreed. And so, where you have 2 willing parties, then we could update the lease. And I don't think anybody thought to ask, well, do I have to do this?
I guess, I mean, the confusion is kind of voluntary has been thrown around, and I think, Mike, you're trying to figure out how voluntary is this? I mean, it's not, like, no one's forcing you to buy the house, but if you don't want to buy a house with that lease, I mean, I guess is it mandatory that it goes to V3? I mean, basically, for it to sell.
No.
So it can
So-
remain at V2. If the new buyers say, I would rather use V2 and not V3, they have that choice.
Yeah, we can't cram it on them. We can't cram it down on them.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the language that's on the screen here, though? This is a proposed addition to V3.
Yep.
Yes.
To me, this language says that once a lease goes into V3, then any future buyer is obligated to take whatever changes to the lease that we
Any new
want to
lease.
impose on them. I mean, that's what this says.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that right?
That's not
Yeah.
the current leases.
It ceases being involuntary after it goes into V3 then. Is that accurate?
If we can bind it to V3, yes. But if not, then, and we kind of went over this at a previous meeting, and Mike made a great point, which is, look, it's a 99-year lease, and we're stuck with it unless we get the new version.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to add, so a lot of housing restrictions, they actually have, everybody has to adhere to the policies, and the policies change. They can change all the time. So this is kind of taking it a step back from like, at all times you have to adhere to the policies, and now it's like, okay, the next person has to adhere by the policies.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think about like how we got where we are, and one of these things is, well, we had remote workers, and the question is, under the definition, is that a local worker, somebody who's not working for a local employer? And part of the idea with these houses is that local employers would have a place for their employees so that their businesses could have employees who live in town. And in 2007, which was before I I was starting law school at that time, we couldn't conceptualize COVID. Nobody thought COVID was going to happen, and nobody thought that remote working was going to occur at the scale that it is now. And so, that sort of thing is likely to happen in the future. And so that's why we want the ability to update these leases or have them subject to policy, which council could change. Now, the lease is what it is now. And, short of other strategies, which we've discussed at other meetings, asking to update the leases is about the most passive approach we can take. And still have a chance at updating the leases. Otherwise, we just forget about it, and that's the end of it, and we just are stuck with the leases for the next 99 years.
Yeah, and at this point in time, it's 80, but, right, so what is then the likelihood that each property has a different lease on it over time? Because somebody has a V1, and now we're going in, and there's no assurance of what you're gonna be signing on to. So if I buy a McCall Avenue house, and I'm buying into it, at some future date, I decide to sell it, now I have no idea what I'm gonna be selling?
No, because I think what Bill's saying is that people who currently have V2, they may not agree to sell with V3. So it has to be that everybody voluntarily agrees. So existing homeowners, it's their choice if they want to move on or not, and for the buyer and the seller. So there's a choice there. So if people like the 99, 80-year lease, they can stay with it and they can sell it to the next person who might like that. If people are comfortable moving to V3, because there's sort of infinite demand for these houses in some ways, then they can move to that. And then we basically, ultimately, I think we'll end up with 2 leases on
And
these
five-
properties.
But so playing it out though, 5 years from now, what if Bree or somebody in the city decides we want a V4?
Yeah, I think that's
I think it's a little bit less likely because of this language, right? Like,
yeah.
so I think the goal is trying to bring it back with consistent language, consistent with our housing policy in a voluntary way, right? We're not forcing this on anybody. But when there is a sale, there's an opportunity to ask the question, are you comfortable with this lease? And if everybody agrees, we're comfortable, and we currently have a buyer who would qualify with this language, right? So, I mean, there's plenty of people in our community that would qualify with this language because it's, in some ways, isn't overly restrictive. There's not even like an income qualification on this. So it really is just an opportunity to try to make the language more clear, update it, that sort of thing. I mean, that's the goal. It's not to like, okay, you bought this house, let's change the rules on you. I think that's why this approach is being taken.
Yeah, we're trying to make the best potential thing for all the community members, or like especially our local employees. So whatever changes we're proposing, it's for the general greater good.
I just want to make sure that what we're doing is going to be consistent across all of the units. And that it's not going to be, that there's not going to be anything that's arbitrary about it. So the people can get into something and know what to expect and not be subject to some new surprise, because that is a surprise. If I buy a house under these terms, knowing that the day that I'm going to sell it, I should be able to sell it under those terms. So if that's the case in V2, then we need that somehow clarified in writing, pointed to, like, here's the highlighted portion that says, you can stay with V2.
Well,
And
that
then,
has
so
be
we need to
allocated.
have some clarity, because I don't know that any of us are pointing to that spot.
Well,
in the
and we
new
don't
one,
have
right?
a draft lease
Yeah.
ready. Like, this is again trying to get a new lease ready for this new buyer with this updated language. And I think dealing with the existing V2, like, I would rely on Bill, like the best way to do that, right? Because the reality is they have an existing lease that says what it says.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we have to adhere to that lease today.
Yeah, and like
Right.
the current.
So I'm reviewing that, and I'm reviewing the one that's on our agenda for next week, which is V3. and I compared that to the prior one.
Oh.
So
I was like,
I'm
you
looking
shouldn't
at
have
all
it yet.
three.
I was like, I don't know if that's the most updated one if you're looking at a V3 right now.
Well, there's a V3 that's in our packet for a week from today.
Oh,
It was submitted in
oh shoot.
So
Okay.
that's what I'm comparing it
Okay.
to just try to get
That
the clarity.
shouldn't be
on
there.
it.
Do we need to remove that from the packet?
Probably. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's still under.
I
legal
had
review.
because I just had legal complete their review yesterday, so I don't know if that's the most updated one. But yeah, that's
But
kind
that's
of
out to the
So I
public
think,
right
I think
now.
right now, we're just trying to decide on these concepts. I mean, the language
yes,
pretty specific, but I mean, it's not final. And
yes,
so it's just, are we good with what is here?
Yes.
We'll see the final lease so we can
Yes.
fine tune.
And this is our second touch, but it's on an agenda item for next week.
Yes, but the
Yeah.
the thing on the agenda item next week is the actual final lease language, right?
yes,
So,
For
Yeah.
lot 4 only.
for this specific
Right.
one. Yeah, housing restrictions are kind of tricky in the sense where a lot of them, it's like the benefit that you're gaining is so much greater than the like risk. 'Cause, like most deed restrictions have that language that it's like, okay, you have to adhere to these policies that may change over time. But that's just part of it, unfortunately.
So this is our second touch. We have a third touch in a week, and I think that we need to have just some clarity there. That what it sounds like we're talking about is that anybody who has a lease right now that is a V1 has been either just told, like, you're gonna go to this new lease, and it hasn't really been an issue over time, which then those ones that have sold are, and there's a few since 2015, there's, I don't know, 4 sales or something like that. Those ones are V2, and now with V2, moving forward, you either stay V2, or you have the option to sign this V3.
Yeah.
And so we just need some clarity that that is in fact, here's where it is in writing. And the reason I say we need it in writing, we need to know exactly where it's highlighted in writing, because the people that have these properties need to know exactly where it's at in writing. Because they need to understand what their choice is, and that it's clear that they can go back and say, not go back and say like, well, at city council they said this, I was there. Where is it?
Yeah,
So we need that really clear so that people can look at it and know what they're into. This may not be a multi-million-dollar home, but it's a big investment to the people that
Yeah.
own these properties.
totally. Yeah, especially for our local employees.
So I just want to make sure that
Okay.
we're getting it right, that we don't
Okay,
make a change
yes.
without making sure we're getting it right.
Okay. Yeah, so you want
Sorry to
clarity on the
take that much
transition
time. No,
from the
I
V2 to V3 and make sure it's really well outlined, correct?
Clarity,
Clarity, yeah.
V2 to V3, and I guess what I'm asking is that there's not going to be a V4, V5, and V6, and so every single one of these houses is going to end up with having, well, you could do this one, or you could do this one, or you can stick with this one, because now we have inconsistency, and now we're going to have issues, and it's issues for the people that we're trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
That's my concern.
Yeah, and I think at this point, a lot of this is pretty basic language. Like, it doesn't really change how you use. I think there's probably some specific things in there that existing homeowners wouldn't like and may not want to change. At least these existing owners may not want to change out of V2, so they might sell it as a V2, and that's fine. They can move it on. I mean, again, this lease was developed 20 years ago, and you were involved in the process. You know kind of how it happened and why it happened the way it happened. Here we are 20 years later. I can't predict in 20 years there isn't going to be a V4. I mean, there might be, but I think the goal is at least to try to get this consistent with what's going on now 20 years later. Just knowing that the world has changed and our
Yeah.
housing policy, I mean, this was called community housing, right? It was a different program that we were running it under. But it is city-owned land, leased at $1 a year for a specific purpose. And I think if you go back to that purpose, I think that's really important. We don't have very many of these units in our house or in our community, and I think they're hugely important to our community. And I think the existing homeowners will likely find a lot of people interested because there's nothing else in this price point.
Yeah, and I'd say that from my previous compliance check, it'll be 7 out of 10 homes will follow this V3, and I think they'll be fine. Like, obviously, it's not a question if they'll be fine or not, because they don't have to adhere to it or like don't have to sign it, but yeah, they
So-
fit in it. But yeah, it's just pretty much clearing up things too, so then when people are like, hey, like, do I qualify under this? It clarifies it for them, it clarifies it for us, and then we don't have to have a ton of conversations with legal all the time, too. It's kind of why we're proposing this change language.
So, would you guys entertain a question from one of these homeowners in the audience of brief interactions?
Not a question, a point of clarity, there's 9 homes involved, and there's 3 of us sitting here, so you could ask if somehow those 9 would agree if you like.
We do not have a public hearing on this subject. It would only be subject to anybody that wanted to speak would be next week at general comments.
Just clarifying the numbers.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused as well. It almost seems a bit arbitrary to introduce a V3 that then becomes like a binding thing that if it sells again, it's going to be subject to the latest iteration of housing.
Or some clarity, like that V3 is going to go away and will not be an option. There's the V4, and now we're trying to move everybody towards that or something.
I mean-
Because I'm not questioning whether or not it's time to update something and what the process is. I just want to make sure we get it right.
I mean, your concern is just the current people under the, I mean, anyone under V2 and V3, V1 and V2. But, I mean, if this is, going to V3 is voluntary, I think that just the question is maybe that language in terms of will be updated upon the next sale. So if there is a V4, it will be automatically updated, you know, and maybe, you know, maybe that's where, you wanna change the language to not have it, or not have that provision added. So if someone agrees, someone buys the house now has V2, they agree to V3. But they don't wanna, they don't want to, except for that, they just wanna know that when they're selling it in 10 years, if there is a V4, they could still sell it under V3.
That
They're
would
selling,
be-
they're selling what they purchased 10
Right.
years ago.
That's the question.
Yeah, so it's just this one provision, so.
Yeah, it's
I
like
mean,
we
I
can
think-
remove it if
but
you
it-
guys aren't happy with it. That's totally an option.
That's
Or we
the
can
question.
update it.
Or, I mean, what, do we really need to update this? I mean, the unfortunate thing about the McCall Ave houses is it was kind of unfortunate from the beginning on how it was established, and it has moved through time and traded hands, you know, multiple times.
I don't see a problem with
But
updating.
like, how do
it.
we maintain it, you know, at least some semblance of consistency there where we're not gonna have, each one's gonna be on some different version of a lease agreement and,
Well, you can't until everybody sells and agrees to the new lease, right? I mean,
Right.
unless there's some way to force it, but it doesn't sound like that's an option we even want to consider, right? I mean, that would be unfair. But, you know, over the next 80 years the idea is hopefully they would end up all being under V3,
Yeah.
That would be the theory, yeah.
yeah.
And the issues are going to come up at
Or,
50
you know,
years from now
when,
when it's down to 30 years left and will a bank loan on it.
yeah, and then,
Because
you know,
it's the
when the
lease is
lease,
less
when the
than the
lease
term
is
of the
less,
loan.
then we can negotiate the, whatever V10 we're on or something like that.
Hopefully the structures last that long.
Yeah.
One thing I want to make sure on before we get our final touch next time is how adamant we are about remote work as a buyer. That the original premise that we want homes where the employers can find employees. And that was a big part of it. Is that still true today? Does that still hold up? And is that something we feel that, I mean, a remote worker can certainly be in the income range. Doesn't mean, because your remote work doesn't mean some are high but not all. And then is the premise that we're trying to make it so that Albertsons and everybody else can find employees, or that their management level can afford this house? Is that still something on our final touch that we think is something we want to have in effect?
I have issues with that concept. I think that we need to take a deeper dive into the home ownership aspect of the housing.
Can you
part of
share?
this, that there's, you know, I think there's a big difference between a seasonal temporary housing need and the whole spectrum all the way up through entry-level home ownership. And I don't understand why we would hamstring a family from taking an opportunity if such arose that even if they had to go travel for work and come back, but they live here, but they have the opportunity to make improvements in their life. And then maybe ultimately they can buy another house and return this or put it back into the local housing. I think that's the idea, is that, you know, potentially these become the starter home, but the ability for someone to gain equity and build, you know, a life for themselves in this community. And to me, you know, if we lay out plans in our housing plan that prevents life changes in someone that is in this ownership path, there needs to be some flexibility in that. And I think that, you know, we're not addressing that at this time. And I don't think that, I mean, it's a bigger conversation and won't be addressed in this lease, but I think that that's a big piece that is missing and has been a part of the conversation in these McCall Ave houses, because it's not a privilege to live in McCall. Like, it's a right to live in McCall. We want people to live in McCall. People have lived here forever and worked elsewhere. We have airline pilots. We have people that work on fishing boats and, you know, oil rigs, you name it. There's people that have occupations that are not in this town.
Yeah.
And they are part of our community.
Right.
And they have a family, you know, they build a family,
Right.
you know, they become part of the community, and that's what we want. Yes, we need housing for local employers, but we also want to be able to have people that are the ability for someone to invest in their life in this community without, you know, with having the opportunity to actually be here. You know, I think that's for me, the big issue with the remote work and you know, that discussion.
It is because it's tricky, because let's say that we have somebody that comes in and they work for a local employer, they qualify, they have a family, they're part of the community, and now one day they get laid off. And so there's an opportunity to do exactly what they're doing in that field, but it's for somebody that the company's registration, their business entity search, you're gonna see that they're registered in Salt Lake City for whatever company it is. And the person now takes a remote job, and then they also just got stuck with $9,000 that they weren't expecting out of the ground lease rent. So insult to injury. So now I lost my job, I got a family here, I'm part of the community, and now I shift, keep my family here to be part of the community. My kids are in school, I'm doing all this, and then I also get the nine grand.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I don't want to jump the gun on this, is the issue to me. Because even though it's only 9 properties, I want to make sure those 9 people are covered.
Yeah.
That's me too.
And I think ultimately this is sort of an overview, kind of a higher level. What you'll have to consider next week is a specific lot and a specific property. And I hear all the conversations as it relates to, you know, the ability to earn more, change jobs. And I think we see that in a lot of other housing programs, and there's provisions put in place. I mean, the good thing about our current McCall Avenue ground leases is people who are in V2, who want to stay in V2, can stay in V2. They can work remote, right? We have kind of a 2-tiered system. If you qualify and you hit all the check marks under V2, you pay $1 a year. If you don't, you pay the 5%. Same thing in V3, right?
Yeah.
So it still gives people the option. It's just about being clear about what the qualifications are and based on what we know about the world today in 2026.
But I mean, I don't think that anyone for, you know, a wide variety of agreements would sign an arguably more restrictive agreement if they have the option to have a less restrictive agreement. So that's for me why it seems a bit arbitrary. Like, what, you know, what's the point? Like, why don't we just keep them all on V2?
You could keep them in V2 and never update the language. Quite honestly, like that's an option that you have, but I think we know that the language from 20 years ago isn't great on a lot of levels, even for the people who have those V2 leases. Like some clarification I think is good. But if that's, you know, I mean, I think that's ultimately a council decision. I mean, I think what Bree's trying to bring up is that there was an intent to this program. It's changed over time. How do we make it better? How do we be good stewards of our housing program and publicly own land for a specific purpose? You know, and then we have to decide where the criteria is and what you feel comfortable with. And I think it's really important to separate out the policy issues from the specifics of maybe we all know the people that live in those places and we enjoy them all. But we need to be really clear about like what the rules are for the future and for the existing owners. And I think just clarity is a big piece of this.
I think we have just a little bit more work to do on it, and because the other one in there, the other work from home does not qualify as local full-time employee. So you've got somebody working from home that's, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable with that clause personally, related, trying to think of people like, and having situations, again, I lost my job, so now I'm gonna, I bought into it, now I'm expecting this, and now I can't work from home in any way, shape, or form. I can't, basically, like, where are we drawing these lines? Like, okay, so I'm gonna go clean houses for vacation rentals, but I'm using my home as my base of operation. So is that work from home? Is work from home mean that I'm just on my computer? I don't know, I just feel like we might not be there yet, is my concern. And I guess for me, because even though it's a smaller, you know, again, it's 9 homes and we've got water and sewer systems we need to keep running. It's also, I'd like to hear from the people, I'd like, hopefully, the 3 people that are here, they could come next week and speak, or tell your neighbors, so that we could also hear the feelings and thoughts of the people that have these leases currently, I think would be helpful, at least to me, in making a decision. And I kind of want to hear from the people that are affected before we just make a decision. And it's voluntarily, nobody may show up, but I think it would probably be helpful to hear from.
It's a difficult problem because there's just so many ways that people work and so many situations they could get in. I mean, I think, you know, what your definition that you have here for non-remote and, you know, the whole justification in terms of, okay, those people tend to have higher incomes anyway. You know, I think that's right for, you know, just totally remote workers that have a stable job that, you know, or, you know, maybe work for a law firm, but they're working remote and it's a job that they have, you know, 12 months out of the year, full-time, whatever, maybe even part-time, but it's 12 months out of the year. And they're constantly working at home. But you know, as Colby mentioned, I mean, some people, you know, oh, well, actually, I had a neighbor that, you know, he worked part of the time out in Alaska on a fishing boat. He came back with his partner, and they lived in McCall and just lived there. You know, he made enough money during his time in Alaska that he didn't have to work here, but he was part of the community, and he lived here. He improvements to his house. He was a great neighbor. I really, you know, felt like, yeah, he was someone that lives in McCall, is a resident here and everything. And I mean, he was technically, you know, legally a resident here, that he considered that his home, because otherwise he was living on a fishing boat. So, but yeah, so I mean, there's all sorts of those kinds of situations that I think are really hard to capture. And I don't know, you know, what kind of definition we can have that can be fair to people that are community members here, but maybe that just don't fit that typical, I work for an employer full-time all year, or whatever the 1,500-hour requirement is in McCall, you know.
Yeah, welcome to housing policy.
So, I mean, I think, you know, for this discussion, I think you've heard our concerns about this, and it is gonna come back to us again, in which we will have the opportunity to hear public comment and discussion, and I think that we've had a good discussion here, and we'll have stuff in mind for when it comes back in front of us, but I feel like it's, you know, in the housing policy, we have a bigger discussion, I think, on this, you know, specific area, and that's, I think, the challenge is like, are we ready to put this in writing yet? It doesn't seem like we're probably ready to put it into a lease, because then, you know, if we make changes, then all of a sudden we have V4 in 6 months, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this work session was really to prep you for a new version of the lease for a specific lot with a property owner who is willing to agree to those terms. I mean, ultimately, you have 9 of these lots. They're one piece of your housing puzzle, you know, it's not the whole program. In all of our research, we don't know any housing programs that allow remote working, quite honestly. So, I mean, I think you have very limited resources, and I think you need to decide how you want to use those resources moving forward. And I think, I think that gets back to what are your goals of your housing policy? Who are you trying to house within your community?
But that's a kind of a different discussion
Right.
than this, because this is a voluntary.
It's a voluntary,
Sign on.
it's specific to one lot with a specific person. And while I think it's important to understand what existing property owners under V2 have to say, this does not impact their decision on
In
how they
this
sell.
situation,
Yeah, right.
I guess.
So I just
you
want
know-
to be clear, like the
Yeah, yeah.
distinction between, we have the policy question that we need to go back and explore. Then we have the specific leases with specific property owners. I'm
Right,
just
so you're
trying
saying if we end up having land that we lease out for other properties in the future, this lease, this V3 is not necessarily what we would be going with. I mean, there's
No.
that sort of discussion later that, a larger discussion we need to
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah.
I mean, you know, this is, you know, it is voluntary, I guess, as long as the person really, you know, purchasing it really knows what they're getting into.
Well, the other one that would potentially solve, and again, maybe I'm taking too much time on this, but the other one that would potentially solve the concern that I'm talking about, I think I hear you kind of agreeing with Colby, is if something changes, there's a hardship, and I'm not seeing in this new draft the same language that I'm familiar with from V2, which talks about hardship being an item related to
should be
the
in there.
$2,500 transfer fee. So there is been a provision in there if somebody, there is a hardship that then you don't pay the $2,500 transfer fee. But in the case of like what I'm talking about of that example, like somebody, you know, they've got to make ends meet. They live here, they've got a mortgage on this place, and they lost their job, and so now they're licking and stamping envelopes in their home or arranging floral displays or whatever it is to make ends meet. Their other work from home does not qualify. They're doing what they can. There's got to be a hardship clause in there.
Yeah, I think
You see
also,
what I mean? Like,
totally.
What do we do to that
Yeah.
family because they live here?
Totally.
I
Yeah, I
don't
guess like,
wanna
that's
have
like,
them subject to something that.
yeah, so
you
like,
know?
I'm not gonna try to come in and be like, you lost your job, like, it's time, like, I want them to come talk to me if those situations happen, because like administratively, we can talk to them and work with them and like give them some grace, like,
But
It's
none of
not-
that-
it's not
You could put
like-
that in the lease, you can.
I'm not
We
gonna,
can add that hardship.
There's-
yeah.
But it
There's,
needs to, it can't be just like you gotta go talk to Bree and see if you can convince her that you had a, you know.
Well, it'd probably
different-
come to you guys is what it
Right,
would
but
end
it
up
needs to be in
to.
writing. because
Yeah.
I
you
think
need it
having a
upfront.
hardship clause is,
Yeah, I
is
think that's
fine.
great.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
what we've learned, like, in this process is, again, I think probably poor language from the past and trying to make it better is, I think having, exception clauses like a hardship is important, and then I think having, sort of an appeal process as well is fine, and then, you know, part of, too, like, just, Bree's got a hard job. I mean, compliance is the least fun part of her job, I will say. Like, this is not what she wants to be doing. She wants to be creating new units, but ultimately, we need to make sure people are complying with leases and deed restrictions and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And so I think just, you know, we've learned a lot in the process and making sure that we have really clear kind of standards and auditing processes that homeowners are aware of and all of those things. I think just being super transparent about here's how we're gonna do that. And we've talked about, you know, bringing you all a policy, which again is all part of the bigger housing thing, like here's how this is going to be done. So we want everybody to have a level of comfort, right? Like the city owns the land, the homeowners own the home. Like, we want this to be a good relationship and we want it to be really clear. And so I think those are the types of things like we can clarify in writing, which would just help like all parties.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think the hardest thing is like gray,
Totally.
unclear language. Like, that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, this is making me want to dive back more into the whole lease because, like, it was under contract and then it fell out and then it came under contract again. So it's like, okay, try to figure out like the core things that we want to update and change. But it sounds like we might need to do even more and update that even more. Because, yeah, like my main goal for the housing program is just super clear transparency, like make sure everybody knows what they're getting themselves into up front. And like that's a huge like educational lift, which is great. But I want everybody to know. And I'm not quite sure if the people who are in the homes actually know exactly what's on their lease too. So I think we definitely want to change that going forward so everybody's familiar with things.
so I guess the challenge is that moving forward, if there's ever a housing situation like this again, it's not gonna be the same as the McCall Ave
No.
because of all the lessons learned, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I understand like the uniformity, the desire for uniformity
Totally.
across the housing, all of our housing options. But like like the McCall Ave is gonna be an anomaly no matter what.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, it's there, it didn't get, you know, lessons learned, but it's an anomaly and like, I
Totally.
don't know how hard you can try to coerce that back into being consistent with every other, you know, the overall housing.
Well, I think
plan.
Lot 4 is a great example. Like, here we have a homeowner, like a buyer and a seller, who are generally comfortable with these terms because it still meets all of their goals,
Yeah.
right, as a homeowner. And we've seen that price come down over time as well, right? So, I mean, I think we just need to separate out kind of the specific leases from like our overall thing. But I agree with you that McCall Avenue is a housing program from 20 years ago. Community housing, revised, right? And it's only gonna provide us so much, but it's still, I mean, the best thing about McCall Avenue homes is that over time, like it went from a lot of second homes, remember, like majority second homes, to now it's slowly converted back to a majority of locally owned homes. And that's our goal, right?
Yeah.
So like we just need to keep working at it. I think I think I heard a lot of concerns and we've taken a lot of notes, and hopefully next week we can bring you something that is a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And I did find the transfer fee and the hardship part is in the V3 draft that's out there.
Thanks for the entertaining the good discussion on this.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're all really passionate about this, and We went over our time again, Michelle.
I know,
What's
we're,
up?
we're not crushing it. I was like 30 minutes. Nathan's got a lot to talk
All right,
about.
yeah, we need to keep moving.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan, are you ready to start your portion, the final event of the evening?
Yeah, we'll do our best here. No guarantees. We're gonna take the time that the council needs. Nathan Stewart, Public Works Director. We brought back our entire team tonight, which I think is really important. Gonna join the meeting here and start bringing up some information. So give me just a second here. Join the meeting.
Just gonna step out real quick.
Okay. So we have tonight with us Ross Hanson with AE2S is here in the room. He's going to help me present. So Ross, if you want to come to the front of the room, because we're probably going to have to tag team this. We also have Greg Losher on. Fortunately, Greg's flight got delayed until 11 o'clock tonight. Otherwise, he was going to be in the middle of trying to get to the airport. So he's done some great work over the last week on trying to understand impacts on rates. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to share my screen. I've got an outline here, and I'll just kind of run through it with you while on screen. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We also have Aaron Greaves here because later in the show we're going to talk a little bit about options, financing options, ballot measures. And Aaron's put a lot of thought into that. So as I get, participate, that was okay. And somehow we share our screen here. Maybe. Come on, technology. Just share the screen, please. Okay. So we're going to start at the top. Get rid of this. So a little bit of background. As we all know, we've secured a $16.5 million loan from the DEQ. That required a ballot measure that we secured in 2024, May of 2024, from the ratepayers. At that time, we told the ratepayers that to better finance that loan, it was going to increase their rates about 4%. We weren't, these numbers are never perfect science because we have a background 3% rate increase kind of built in yearly. So what you see, what we did in 2025 and in 2026, they were 5% rate increases. And that 3% attempts to cover inflation, which we know is not reality. And the results of our bids even further reinforces that. But we also have a $500,000 grant for the water treatment plant expansion specifically, which gives us a total project funding of $17 million. And fortunately, because of a lot of really good fiscal management by the water department over the years, we've been able to cash fund about $4.1 million of this overall project cost to date, meaning we could request reimbursement from DEQ for that, and we have not yet, but we're eligible for that. The Lower East Side Water Storage Tank, the contract was awarded in early July of this summer. The contract price, as you're well aware, came in way higher than we wanted, and that was principally because of extremely high concrete costs in Valley County. We have one concrete supplier, and I think we're seeing that they're exercising their market advantage, particularly when you ask for special concrete. We also evaluated that bid, much higher labor costs than are typical in the Intermountain West. We're seeing prices on imported materials are being affected by tariffs, and then certainly high cost for U.S. made materials. So we do get a reduction, a 5% reduction on extremely high U.S. materials. So then you can import them, but now we're seeing the imported prices are now having tariffs on them as well. So a few reasons why these prices are very, very hard to predict. And to be honest, I don't even know, there are no 2 million gallon water storage tanks in Valley County, so it's really hard to get numbers. But Ross is here, and he's willing and ready to answer all of your hard questions about why these prices have come in so high. But we were able to bring the price of the project down. We worked hard with our general contractor. We were able to come up with some creative ideas and save about $500,000 on concrete design. We were able to look at the materials on the project site and save another $130,000 to $140,000 there. And then this 5% waiver on Buy America gave us another $210,000. So although the price was really, really high, we've worked really hard to save about $0.85 million on that so far. That's the status of that project. What we're here to talk about tonight is the water treatment plant expansion. Those bid results are in your packet. And the low bid came in about $5.8 million higher than our estimate. That was staggering for all of us. And we talked a lot over the past 3 weeks about what we can do. We worked with the low bidder to evaluate what was going on. What we learned is how difficult it is for bidders to get pricing. Pipe suppliers and different vendors won't even provide pricing to these guys until the day of because they're worried of bid shopping, meaning they won't provide their prices in advance. So we never had an opportunity for any of these bidders to come to us and say, hey guys, this is not looking good. Like we're not going to come close to your estimate. They put their prices together within 24 hours of the actual bid opening. And that's really difficult because I think if we'd have known that these prices were coming in really, really high, we would have looked at different opportunities like trying to figure out, is there anything we can cut out of the project? When you look at the bids that's in your packet, you'll see we broke out all of the components that we could in the project so that we would only have to fund what's ordinary and necessary, which is the base bid. But even that base bid came in $5.8 million higher than our estimate. So Ross is here to provide some discussion about that. And we learned something even more disappointing this week in confirmation with our legal counsel. The two lowest bids have technical issues. There were some T's that weren't crossed and some I's that weren't dotted. And therefore, unfortunately tonight, I'm here to tell you that we probably need to reject all bids and rebid the project. So that's kind of the introduction to this debacle that we're in. Ross is here. I think this is a good opportunity to stand for questions.
You got this, Ross?
I hope I do. There's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah.
Nathan, when did we find out they were non-responsive?
Today at 11.
Wow, that is a big disappointment, yeah.
Now, I talked to the low bidder today. They were traveling in Europe, but they took my call. The positive thing was they're interested in rebidding.
Good.
They can't guarantee if they call their electrician up that they're going to have the same price that they got before, but and I think there are a lot of bidders that have been very anxious to hear what we're doing. I've gotten a lot of calls. But but yeah, I mean, as the council's well aware, we've been working extremely hard through the holiday period and up till now to try to figure out everything we can do. And I think we have some good information once we get beyond these technical difficulties, really to show you the impacts on rates. But we wanted to take the first part of this work session to kind of vet through your questions, provide Ross an opportunity to explain what he's learned, and go from there.
This is really helpful because you probably are aware we got a number of comments about this project from the public, and so this will be really helpful. Thank you for organizing.
I did, and they came through late today, so didn't have a ton of opportunity to prepare, but
Can I ask a question? Are we unique in seeing the bids come in so far above the engineer's estimate, or is this happening in other communities?
All over. We do work from Wisconsin to Idaho, from North Dakota down to Colorado. And even places where we have common work within a 6 or 8 month time frame, a 25% swing in bids of common work is not unheard of. I mean, it's just there's so many aspects that are not technical. I mean, if a group of contractors all have a fair amount of work backlog that they have to do, they're going to approach their bid differently than if they're hungry for work, right? What's the market volatility? You know, what are the materials, like these suppliers that aren't giving their information till the day of the bid? I mean, if there's a lot of volatility in the market, how much markup are they putting on that to cover themselves, right? And then in conjunction with that, I mean, there's the term compounding interest, right? Well, markup is the same way. If a supplier is marking it up because there's volatility, then, you know, the contractor's gonna mark it up, and he's compounding that issue, right? So there's all of these, there's not you guys are not in an uncommon thing. The one I would say, the one thing I would say is the labor market in Valley County is quite drastically higher than pretty much any area that I've went out and bid work. Pretty incredible between the labor market and the shortage of subcontractors. The fact that we only had, you know, one responsive electrical subcontractor. Well, it doesn't, if that electrical contractor knows that he doesn't have any competition, what's the end result there, right? Now, I'm not saying that he does know that, but he probably knows pretty well who else is going after this work, just by knowing his area, right? So those two things together really were eye-opening when you start comparing the bids that were received and the engineer's estimate.
I think, Ross, one of the things that you pointed out to me that was very interesting, and I'm putting on the screen here what you have in your packet, which is the bid results.
Yep.
And amazingly, you can't see that. So let me see if I can't fix that.
Well, it says you're sharing, but
It does. Here we go.
there you
Okay. So I'll try to zoom in for the audience. But 15.9 million is the base bid from Patriot. Patriot's subcontractors were how many?
They had 3 subcontractors, and then they were self-performing mechanical.
And how many subcontractors were in these higher bids?
Up to 9
Up to 9.
subcontractors were the highest, and that's really the reason between the 16 and the 22, is the more subcontractors you have, the more that compounding markup affected their bids. Because I mean, once you get above, you know, like you know, into that 10, 15 million, you start adding markup on top of millions of, you know, of, say, a $3 million electrical bid, that markup goes a long way pretty fast.
So I think what you explained to me too was that your estimates on labor were way off. You used labor estimates from the Bozeman area. You used estimates from the Big Sky area, which is not located near a major metropolitan area. And still those numbers pale in comparison to the prices that we're seeing in Valley County. And that's unfortunate. So I think what we know now is that the reality is that this price is high. And now we have to rebid it. The good thing is we can do that very quickly. I already mentioned to Forrest and Bessie Joe, the best thing we do is immediately put on your next council agenda to reject all bids and rebid. We have to rebid. We have to advertise for a minimum of 2 weeks, and we have to wait a minimum of 10 days after the last bid. So we can open bids on February 17th.
Yep.
So think about that a little, Aaron. The idea with the rebid is that if we get that price and we know what we think we can build the project for, we can have better understanding of what the impact of rates would be, and we could incorporate that into a ballot language if the council chooses to go down that route. That's kind of the second half of this discussion, so I don't want to get away from the details and the questions. I do have the public comments. Many of the comments were, you know, are we doing anything more than we should be? Are we doing just the bare minimum? The answer is yes, in the base bid. You awarded, or you granted a conditional use permit for your water treatment plant because you never had one before. And going through that public process, there was a very hearty dialogue about building a storage facility so that it didn't look like a bunch of materials sitting around. And we talked about the benefit of having covered storage for the vehicles so that the vehicles wouldn't be full of snow in the middle of an emergency. Some of those costs are relative to 16 million. Those bid alternates are here, the alternate storage facility. Interestingly, this bid actually came in slightly under the engineer's estimate. Many of these things could be added at a future time, and you also have a water master plan that's going to take into consideration a lot of these things. But these facility carports, you know, there's a very beneficial price there, and whether you know, the cost to add those things on after the fact is a lot more than if we did that as part of the facility, because the whole water treatment plant needs a new roof anyway. It's leaking, and it's 20 years old, over 20 years old. So the question is, you know, is this price and what we're discussing more than what we need? Can we pare it back? Lyle, last week, there was discussion about, you know, is there any way we could phase this? The answer is no, because we're basically providing the minimum redundancy necessary to meet DEQ's requirements. And by 2028, when these facilities come online, we project we will be out of compliance with DEQ. We're already facing violations. And that's part of the discussion of, are these improvements ordinary and necessary, which somewhat justifies other funding options through judicial confirmation, which Sean's here to talk about. Some of the other questions are, can we implement policies to reduce water use? Absolutely. I think the council's worked really hard to create a rate structure that encourages water conservation. Whether we decide to go a step further and create a water policing unit, that's an option. But I don't think that's going to solve the problem within the next 2 years. And I'm not sure how the community would respond to that. That's something you would know better than I would. But I think it's something we want to consider. And certainly from a public information standpoint, there's a really important message about the more you use water, the bigger your facilities need to be and the higher your water costs are. But as I've mentioned before, the water use growth in McCall has been historic and consistent. We're not seeing the rate increase like dramatically in the last 2 or 3 years. All the water modeling has shown a very consistent growth pattern. The problem is your water treatment facility doesn't have that redundancy to handle the increased demand in the summer versus the winter, the big fluctuations. And these improvements specifically address that, as well as provide fire protection, which is required by DEQ.
And important to our insurance companies that we're finding it more difficulty for.
Yeah, there were some extensive questions, Bob, about the water storage tank. A lot of questions from, I think your name is Sherry. Maybe I've got that name wrong.
No, you got it right.
Okay. About change orders and whether things were change ordered out of the project and whether someone delivered pipes that was incorrectly. We have not incurred any additional costs on that project since you awarded the contract. The only thing that we've done is brought the price down. So, and that contractor has a lot of obligations and a lot of work to complete yet. But at every step of the way through the first year of construction, there hasn't been any real concerns about cost increases. We have a $250,000 contingency built into that contract itself, and the contractor is well aware of the obligations that they have. They just, self-funded and self-constructed a road up there so that they can make sure that they can get it done. So we're certainly not out of the woods, but there's nothing to indicate oversight or any kind of anomaly on that project that would have increased the project cost. We're doing well there.
On the wrong pipe thing, the wrong pipe was delivered to the site, but it was caught and sent back, but the contractor paid for that mistake.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was,
Here it is.
it's just items that happen during construction and you take care of them, and I think that contractor, Devco's, been very upfront with, trying to make sure they're doing a good job and operating in the best interest of the project and the city.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here that really, there are some presumptions that maybe things were going on wrong. There's discussions about Pine Creek Ranch in this comment. So I want to be very clear about this because Bessie Jo and I have had to field a ton of questions, and I have voiced back to Bessie Jo, my office door is open. Any citizen can come and have a meeting with me, and I can explain these things rather than get emails and public records requests. That's inefficient. So the situation with that discussion and the attached letter that I wrote, when we were trying to size the water storage tank and place it in the proper location, we provided you a preliminary study that identified some different locations. Originally, we thought the tank needed to be at a certain elevation to provide a certain level of pressure. We then learned very quickly that we didn't need it to be that high. It didn't need to be that high in the community because we're principally serving, most of our customers are lower in elevation. So we identified a site directly east of the Woodlands that met that elevation criteria. That was the decided location. When we said we moved the tank location, we moved it slightly higher because our calculations at that time wasn't providing the pressure that we needed for the community, not directly for Pine Creek Ranch. Now, the discussions with Pine Creek Ranch at the time had to do with how do we route the pipelines to the tank? And we knew that we needed to get easements to do so. we have an existing easement through Pine Creek Ranch's property or through Craig Grove's property, as well as the Noaks. And so we knew that if we could do that in coordination with a future development proposal, that the cost of securing those easements would come down quite a bit. So we didn't do anything specifically to help a developer other than locate the pipeline in the right location that was advantageous to their potential future development plan. So the cost of the easement to the water department and the ratepayers was zero. That's what we did. Any questions there?
Can I just make a comment about, whether we should be taking out elements of the project and trying to cut this and cut that? I think it's worth just reminding ourselves that that plant that we have now was originally supposed to have 4 filters.
That's correct.
And it was reduced to 2 filters to cut costs. So, some council 30 years ago was faced with a similar situation, and they made a decision to cut the capacity in half, and they thought, well, this will be good for the next 15 years or whatever it was going to be. And that's kind of like why we're where we are now. So this council, I think, has to make the decision about whether to make hard decisions that ultimately put the community in a better situation for the long run and probably save people money over the next 30, 40, 50 years. Or, let's take things out so that we can avoid having to find the money to do it now.
In conjunction with that, Forrest, they also, one of the other aspects of this project is the new contact time basin. And the need for that is because when they went to 2 filters, they also cut the clear well in half. So you have half the volume of stored treated water to begin with, and that's why we need the additional contact time basin. So you hit the nail on the head. This is all, predicated on cuts that were made to the original plant.
And I would add, because there were 13 questions on this one public comment. The costs, in working with Pine Creek Ranch, the linear foot of cost of pipeline was reduced than if we weren't using their property. If we went around that property and just worked with the Noakes family, we would have had a pipeline that would have not paralleled our pipeline and would have had to gone further out of the way. So really, I think there's this, for some reason, somebody thinks that this was collusion or that maybe somehow the city spent more money to subsidize a potential future development. Couldn't be further from the truth.
I think we can get together with the individual and answer their questions unless council wants more specific questions from that answer.
I think we're kind of familiar with where we're at, how we got here.
Good.
Where we need to figure out where we're gonna go.
Thanks.
That's what we really are here for, right?
Well,
I'm
that's
glad you
true.
brought that up,
Thorough.
Nathan.
Yeah.
No, that's good that you brought it up, because we need to air those things. We hear that in the woodlands, and that there's that, I don't wanna use the word suspicion or whatever,
Sure.
but I think maybe the right thing, you get some of the people in that have that thing and go over the data with them, and maybe we don't need to spend more time here, but it's
Correct.
A valid use of your time to meet with them and put
The
that to
the
rest.
size of that water storage tank, the size of the water lines that feed it, and the size of the treatment plant, these design criteria are independent of any development project. The good thing is when these facilities get brought on board, it builds us capacity and time to accommodate future growth. Where that growth happens changes all the time. And the will serve letter or the commitment that we provided 2 years ago to one specific developer is for that specific time. When another land use application comes into the process, we reevaluate it again. So the conditions that were contemplated at the time with that individual developer no longer exist. And when we receive a new land use application, whether it's a Woodlands Phase 3 or it's another affordable housing project across town, we're going to have to evaluate that and identify what improvements they may need to make to the system to receive their fire flow or whatnot. So I think we've talked enough about that. Unless you have other questions.
No, good.
Okay. So let's move back, and we'll talk about solutions. So, given the fact that we have to reject bids, we don't 100% know how much money we need. However, because you did have a pretty solid cash reserve, that amount of money isn't the total delta between what the project cost would be and what we probably need in additional funding. So you have a couple strategies here. The delta in the funding, I do have a table. If I can find it. I think is here. So, roughly, if we took into consideration the low bid that we were looking at and some of the savings we had, you could be looking at $7 million. But if we look at, say, an $18 million low bid, you're probably looking at something more like $11 million. So some of the thought process here is if we can get these new bids in, we can hone in on what we think that price is, and maybe we can do that in advance of the ballot measure or the decision that the council needs to make at a future public hearing. Let's talk about cash financing. Greg, you're on the line. One of the things that we've done is working with Randy, we've identified cash funding that we've provided so far. And if we did nothing at all, and we just tried to cash finance this project, your recommendation is that instead of a 3% rate increase, we'd be looking at something more like a 10 to maybe 15% increase in 2027 and a very similar one in 2028. And then we would have generated the necessary cash to execute the project so we could do a rate reduction in 2029 to bring us back to somewhat previous levels. Can you explain that?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Greg Loescher with Bowen Collins and Associates. Yes, as Nathan said, so the two things we were asked to look at when the prices came in for construction of the plant improvements were what impact would the additional project costs have on rates if for some reason you had no choice and had to cash flow the increase. And so that's this first option here is if you empty out your coffers, basically the water fund, and then you increase rates in order to cash flow this, this more draconian rate increase is what you would end up with. Now, a couple things I'll say. Overall, you have viable options. Your water fund is healthy, and your rate structure has been set up over the last few years, and the council has adopted rates that make it so that we can actually solve these problems with adjustments rather than with major pain. So anyway, this first option, if we had to cash flow it, would be 2 years worth of 10 to 15% increases, followed by a reduction to bring us back down to the current 3% per year trajectory that we're currently on. The one asterisk I'll put on this option is this analysis is done using the low bid number. The 10 to 15% probably has to be adjusted if we have a $19 or $20 million project instead of a 15. The message here is this is not recommendation of what to do. This is education what to do if you couldn't secure any additional funding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next, and Nathan, is it okay if I go to the next option of what rate impacts would be if you did secure additional funding?
Certainly, go for it.
So yes, we also looked at if you were to obtain additional funding authority and take, say, another $7 to $8 million in debt from DEQ, your rate increases that we would deal with then would be what I would call nominal. In addition to the 3% annual regular increases for a couple years for 2027 and 28 would increase to 5% increases on the order of 5% increases for a couple years, which is, in my mind, not a very hard sell. And it's not a huge impact on individual ratepayers, whereas cash flowing is a bigger impact. It has a bigger impact on their monthly bills. So this option is very doable if you could get more funding authority. The amount of rate increases you would need would be short term, and they would be relatively small relative compared to the increases that are already built in annually. And in answer to a potential question, you do have capacity to take on more debt than the $16.5 million. You're not bumping up against your debt service limits. You could take on this additional debt and still be financially healthy.
Greg, just want to make one question on that. You say bump up against our financial max. What sets that? You're just looking at maximum debt ratio based on our revenue and our service. Is that how you judge what you would say that we're not at our limit for borrowing?
Yeah, when we look at bonding authority, we look at debt service limits, and yes, there's a threshold we set. You have to be above that in order to borrow X amount of dollars, and if you drop below that, you're exceeding your bonding authority, your bonding ability, your ability to fund the debt.
And Nathan, in our packet, it's really clear. It says DEQ has offered to provide the necessary additional funding under the same terms, which is 2.75% interest, 20 years.
That's correct.
Over the current agreement. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I got an email from DEQ today. I thought they were calling with a white horse and a grant for us, but it wasn't. It was an invitation to the JWAG meeting, or not the JWAG meeting, the WAG meeting. And but yes, we talked with them extensively. DEQ is very committed to the projects that they fund. They have sufficient funds in place. I know the governor's talked a lot about reductions, and there's been a lot of discussions about reductions in the SRF funding. The information I've received from DEQ indicates that that's not impacting their commitment to this project. So we would certainly get that in writing. There would be an agreement modification if we got that debt authority in the future, and that would come before you as soon as possible. Yeah, so before we get too far into talking about number 3 versus number 1, do we want to close the loop on option number 2, which is judicial confirmation? Sean Costello with Skinner Faucet's here. I just handed out a document that he helped prepare that kind of gives the outlines about judicial confirmation. We had a staff meeting earlier this week to really vet through that with Bill Punkany, myself, our finance director, Aaron, Ross, and Forrest. And what we gleaned from that was a lot more of a red flag on judicial confirmation than I think we originally assumed. There's some real benefits to judicial confirmation because a judge deems it ordinary and necessary. He deems it for the project. He doesn't set the price. But the bar's pretty high to prove that. And given the status of where we're at, that we've cash funded some of this so far, and we haven't requested reimbursement yet because we've been trying to save on paying interest payments. And the fact that there are other options, there's a high risk that may or may not succeed. So Sean, can you fill the council in from your legal perspective on what your thoughts are there?
Sure, yeah, I mean, thank you, Mayor and Council. Sean Costello with Skinner Fawcett in Boise. We serve as bond counsel to the city. So, yeah, I think Nathan did a great job just with the overview of the issues with judicial confirmation, but over the past couple of weeks since we've been engaged on the issues, we just want to be really clear with the risks, the risk analysis. The most recent case law that we have is sort of really on-point case law. Is this case called City of Chalice, the consent of governed caucus. And I want to pull out and just summarize just a few risks that we've gleaned from that case. So first is the necessary, really we're just focused on what is necessary. So judicial confirmation is asking the court to weigh in on whether the expenditure is necessary, because it's an exception to the constitutional debt limit that requires a vote of the electorate. So first, under the Chalice precedent, debt is only necessary if it addresses an immediate threat to life or safety within 12 months. It sort of puts a timeline on having to rectify this necessary expenditure, using this expenditure to rectify basically an emergency. And that made it more difficult, continues to get more difficult over time. It used to be a much looser standard. Also, related to the Chalice case, Idaho courts typically view expansions of systems and growth when the expenditure is framed in those terms. They don't view it as necessary. They view it as implies, growth and future planning, and typically it requires voter consent versus judicial confirmation. Also, we have, the court has explicitly ruled that saving money and the result of rising construction costs aren't the same as legal emergencies, as being out of compliance with DEQ, where you're being fined $10,000 a day, something like that. And then also the really big issue with the Chalice case that I want to make clear is that the court reviewed it was just looking at telemetry and updates to meters, basically. So it didn't even get to a lot of the meat of the case, because it says updates to the meters weren't necessary. So it took the entire project out. So we have to be very careful of the risk there being, if one element of the project is determined by the court to not be necessary, then the case ends, it's over. So the final risk that I wanted to bring up is just the fact that it is litigation. It's a form of litigation, meaning that at any point, within procedural bounds, the case can become contested, and that can lead to appeals and long drawn out legal processes, expensive legal processes. So I think over the past couple of weeks, we've sort of trended more toward advising a bond election, since the timelines are very similar, and just from a cost and risk analysis basis. And I'll stand for questions.
So it sounds pretty clear that has a lot of risk involved, and that if you combine that with what we heard from our public over and over, they'd like a bond election to go forward. And with DEQ's encouragement, it seems like we need to explore that quickly and see what the options are there.
I'm not in favor of judicial confirmation for several reasons. I think it bypasses the public process. If you go for a bond election, the public has a chance. There's a lot of involvement. If they want us to do the pay-as-you-go and see water rates go to 20 to 25%, assuming we're going to have to need 20 million versus 15, that's the public telling us which way they want to do it. And I think builds a little more transparency than the confirmation, beyond the fact that it's just risky and it might not be approved anyhow. So I think, in my mind, we could rule that out. Your thoughts, Julie? We just got one or two.
Yeah, I think so. Both have risks, but you know, that statement that if one bit of the project is not deemed necessary, the whole thing goes away is a little concerning. And, you know, I mean, both cost, you know, time and you know, staff time and money to do, but, you know, judicial confirmation, I mean, that's gonna be, you know, money that we have to pay out to attorneys and everything, and, you know, and if it's contested, that could get pretty, expensive. So it seems like, going for a bond seems to be the more reasonable way to go. We had really good, approval, percent, by our voters, and I think they understand this is a really important project for the community. And, you know, compared to the tenfold more increase in the rates, potential, you know, percent that the rates can go up, compared to cash funding it, and, you know, I think our voters are really, are well educated and can be well educated, or, you know, can understand this information. I think that, you know, there's probably a good chance that they will continue to support, funding this project.
What do you think, Mike?
I guess I have some concern on the judicial confirmation route as well. But I definitely don't know that I have any answers.
Yeah, it seemed, Sean just kind of brought up a few, I think, good points of making that judicial confirmation as an extra dicey consideration.
One of the questions the staff batted around was, you know, why would the judge say it's an emergency when you haven't gone to the voters first? And you're building the water storage tank. So, you know, will that in itself avoid the emergency? I think what we find is that judicial confirmation has been used when systems have been in such a bad place where they're illegally discharging pollutants into the environment, when they cannot prove a viable solution. And fortunately, this community is not in that position right now. It's always an option, and so that's why we brought it to you tonight. But I don't think we're at that point, fortunately. So
How do you guys feel about moving forward in the conversation and considering the bond election? Just like the plan A, what that looks like. Do you feel that you guys want to continue that conversation?
Yeah, and if we, I mean, is it like something that makes sense to, if we go for the bond, do we have a set number, you know, and that we know that then with the other funds that we're gonna make up the difference, so that once we go to the voters, it's like, this is the amount, we have the cash if we have overages or whatever. There won't be another, because now there's fear, right? So we don't want the fear that we're gonna come back another round being like, need another 2 million, that we can fund that.
yeah, up
sounds
until
like
11 o'clock this morning, I was prepared to come to you with a lot of confidence that we kind of knew the sideboards. And unfortunately, people don't cross their T's and dot their I's.
But the idea, Nathan, is that if you get responsive bidders, timing wise, we can accept that bid, lock in that price. you know,
Correct.
And then be able to do the bond election. I mean, we don't need to
Yeah.
do the bond election to make sure we have the money to then go back to the contractor and say, hey, can you do it for this price? I mean,
Right, so Aaron's here, and I think, Aaron, you and I need to tag team that question, because this is such a dynamic situation. I want to be very accurate with you guys. What we just talked about over the last 2 hours was that if we reject all bids on the 22nd, we advertise on the 29th and the 5th, we could open up the bids on the 17th. So we would be in a position at that point, and we could probably sequence if we needed a special council meeting in that process to help draft the ballot measure language. Now, the only thing you're changing is 2%, 1%, 3%, really. So I don't want you guys to think that this is critical, that we have to get this perfect. And Greg has very much cautioned me that, you know, we want to communicate to the ratepayers within a range because, you know, we can't always know exactly what the water system's going to need. But we have a lot of good information here, and I think you're seeing the relative cost here. And in the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks, we can work together and get you better information to say, yeah, we're confident we're going to have the bids and we will be able to make that ballot measure adjustment. Aaron, help me out.
So before we start that, I still have a couple questions that lead
Okay.
up to the, is that all right? I think it should fit in now.
Can we just share?
So,
Oh, yeah.
you know, interesting, maybe total lack of understanding on my part, but I was happy to hear to say we aren't going to accept those bids. When I listen to the conditions that we're under and think, and I know they could come back higher. And so my point is too a little bit, why the rush? And rush, I mean, are we looking at a couple months instead of a couple weeks? And, you know, living next door to Depco and watched them do all their work, I thought they were pretty efficient and right on. And they, you know, the understanding is, I mean, the bid increase cost was we increased the cost. It didn't creep, is what I'm getting to, as Nathan explained. And so, who else is out there that's capable of doing this and meeting the conditions of the bid? And to what extent can we look and say, this is why we rejected all of them, there's the conditions, you know, and the amount of subcontractors being used, and I get, you know, is the subcontractors can configure their costs, but a contractor building in a cushion, which they have to do, then the subcontractor building in the cushion on the cushion, so suddenly it is the point, really, do we, is the gap truly $5.8 million from reliable estimates, and suddenly we're here, and I go, I would like to say, what can we do to find other additional bidders, or are they out there, or how, what? Not that the cut the project, but what environment would create somebody hungrier to do it?
Ross?
Yeah, I think I might just sit back down.
Yeah. But because that's the public is for sure going to be
Sure.
wanting to know that, and you know nobody likes to be gouged, and the sense is we got gouged. I'm not saying the public isn't that aware of it now, but that's going to come up, and what do we do to say no, that we weren't at all?
The focal point of the rebid and ahead of the rebid is going to be circling back with the general contractors that bid previously. That's job number one, to let them know that it's gonna be going back out onto the street, because we wanna maintain that level of competition. I don't think we're gonna get all 6 of them back. I think a couple of them are gonna drop out. They're gonna be like, no, not interested. But I wanna try to maintain that. But I also have a pretty good base of subcontractors. Pretty good base of subcontractors, mechanical, electrical, those kinds of people that we do a lot of work with. And I'm gonna do my best to engage those entities to see if we can broaden the base of subcontractors that are willing to provide quotes on these projects. And outside of that, I mean, we can lead a horse to water, right?
Right.
But
You said just what I'd like to hear. You know, how much time does it take you to work your network to bring somebody new to this process that might have an opening because something else or canceled on their schedule, what else? Do we need to really rush that much? Or is there a time frame for you to give people a month's consideration to?
I think we want to rush that much, just simply because I don't want to have too late of a bid opening where it puts too much pressure on getting the bond election, all that information ready and out on the street. I wanna have that number so that we have something concrete that we're working off of. And
Yeah.
I don't think rushing is going to hurt us at all, because, I mean, you're talking, you know, it'll take me a couple days, 2 to 3 days of consistent phone calls throughout the day to really get everybody engaged in our network. I don't think it's gonna, it won't hurt the bidding process at all.
I think the other thing, Lyle, is you have many of these contractors teed up with their pricing. They're just calling back to confirm that the tariff prices haven't changed or whatnot. So we have these guys kind of well educated on where they're at. And to your point, there is a chance the prices could come down. Historically, we don't see that on rebids. But there's a possibility. And but I do think if we do this aggressively and we keep the bidders interested and they know that it's being rebid, they can decide to sharpen their pencil or figure out what they want to do. The nice thing too is that can save us a construction season. And we really do need these facilities to come online in 2028. So if we miss this construction window, it's going to just continue to put more and more pressure on us to meet our water quality and our water demand needs. If we slowed it down and we waited, I think you're probably looking at saying, okay, well, we're probably not going to start this until, too much further down the road. Now, there's a procurement period and there's a lot of things, a water treatment plant, you can do some things in the winter that you can't do on that storage tank, and that storage tank's under construction. So we'll think about that. But my recommendation at this point would be to very quickly move forward, inform the bidders, let them know it's coming out. They've all been well informed, the rules, and it's all what it is. The basic principle is just the base bid, and where the prices come in after that, we can see where it's at. And I think what I've tried to position my water department and what we're looking at as far as other investments in the water system, that could be very much contingent upon a bond election. The sooner we know about that, the better we can plan for the other capital improvements that you have, because these aren't the only investments you need to make in the system.
Well, it seems, Nathan, that if we're talking about a May election for bond, we have to have a good number. And we can't have a good number unless we get a rebid. So as soon as legally we can reject bids, apparently we can't do it tonight because it wasn't an action item or something. But as soon as we can do that, reject those bids, the sooner you can advertise again, correct?
Correct.
And the sooner that we'll be able to have language in the bond election that's meaningful. And the last thing we want is another repeat where we go out we say we need 8 million and we really needed 12. The gap was bigger.
Yeah, when Aaron presents, and then we can see the timeline, and then maybe that'll come also, how much pressure does DEQ, and the conditions we're not meeting, drive this? Because, what's the DEQ's allowances? Because we went to go for November. If by going for a November election, and I realize I don't know if we lose a season of building on the water treatment plant or not, but if by going for November and we have more time to get some different kinds of bids, and DEQ is not saying to us, we're gonna pull your license or we're gonna prevent you, I've heard that comment, how much is DEQ really driving this?
I can't speak for DEQ. I can speak for what the rules are and what our planning documents show. And DEQ requires that we have a 5-year, every 5 years we update our water master plan. So all the projections that we've provided to you in the last 2 years have identified that these improvements need to be online by 2028. So we're not in violation of our DEQ permitting rules. If they see that we've been trying to generate funding and we're not successful in the bid, I can't imagine the DEQ is going to look unfavorably at the city if we're trying our best. Mm-hmm. And I'm not experienced in their fines and how they restrict that. You probably stand a better chance at judicial confirmation at that point. But then you also have to look at inflation and what's the cost of this project going to be 2 or 3 construction seasons down the road. So I don't see too many upsides to waiting.
I'm going with your recommendation, Ben. That's good enough for me, but I just want to get that out.
I don't think you're going to see a heavy hand on DEQ to answer your question specifically, but we can ask them that, and we can bring that information back to you.
I think it's
Just a point of clarification I wanted to add. So you got 2 main DEQ compliance things that you're kind of butting up against. One has to do with the water storage tank, and that has to do with fire flows and storage capacity given peak use, right? We can't meet that today, or we know that in 2027 that we're going to be beyond that. So that's the date for the storage tank. 2028 is the treatment capacity and disinfection contact time. That's where the water treatment plant comes into play. That's why we push so hard to get the water tank under construction this year, so that by the end of next year, at the end of 2027, it's online, and we've kind of steered around that compliance issue.
It seems like, Nathan, what you and Aaron have brought before us tonight is the fastest, most prudent way to keep moving forward. And I know quite a bit about DEQ. They're not interested in delays. They want to see us doing everything that we can legally to get this project done.
Correct.
May I, Mayor?
Brass tacks.
Okay. First, I'd like to add, go Vandals. I'm missing the basketball game right now, and I think we're ahead. So I think it's important to just clarify for the people who are tuning in tonight that reminder that the previous election for the bond for the water expansion project was passed because they were deciding on financing, not whether or not we were doing the project. I want to be really clear with the community that the council and the community were all behind the fact that we need to do what we need to do to protect our drinking water. And so the question in front of voters in 2024 was not whether or not to do the project, but again, was how to finance it. That question would remain the same in this particular election as well. It does need a 50% plus one, not a supermajority. So for reminder, we got 79% in the last election, which you could infer that the majority of your citizens understand that spreading that cost over benefits them and their bottom line and their bills and their water bills. So I'm here to talk to you about one main concern I have and how we can pivot through that, but also just to give you kind of a real life timeline. So our May election would be the 19th. We'd be filing in March, meaning we'd need to have our ballot language and everything sort of summed up in mid to late February, because you have to approve it. And then Bessie Jo then has to submit that for us. So there's a lot that happens there. So what that also means is you might not be able to wait for a bid for you to decide on your total number. My recommendation, or for council's consideration, would be to take the previous bid that we had, add 15-20%, which honestly is probably just another $1 million, and probably would not alter the rates that much, but that's Greg Loescher's job, not mine. But I'm almost positive that council could feel confident in coming up with a general number. Why should you do that? Well, we need to start outreach to the public. In fact, it's starting right now, because as soon as we leave this meeting, media is going to contact me and ask us what just happened, okay? So my concern for you is to give you a head start. If I page down in this process, hopefully I can find it again, you're gonna see that we're already about 3 weeks behind where we normally would be in an election like this. There's a lot that goes into this, not just the actual bond itself, not just the election itself, but it's an education process that we have to reach out to every one of our water customers. We have to have all of our ducks in a row, all of our messaging consistent, our website built, our deliverables done, our community meetings set. A lot has to happen before that May election, just like every other election we've ever done. We have a history of being successful in outreach and giving our citizens the options to make the best decisions for the community. And typically, they align with what the council sees as the vision because they understand that you have their best interest at heart. And I think that that's where they'll be here as well. But that doesn't mean we don't educate, and it doesn't mean we don't do the same amount of outreach that we normally do. So I'm a little concerned about that. So if council doesn't choose a way forward with a number, we'll have to pivot. I don't know what that looks like exactly. We might start with like a softball education piece where we tell them sort of a state of the city and what options could happen. I mean, we might be able to do education outreach in an optional way, but I would like us to be firm if we can.
You could talk about a range.
Could talk about a range.
Could I ask for just some quick clarity
course.
on dates and timelines?
Yeah.
So, obviously the May election, what just our electoral obligation timelines, when do we
Yeah.
need to be on the ballot?
Bessie Jo, remind me if you need a public hearing to submit. We do not.
No.
So really, end of February, probably?
ultimate public hearing is the vote.
Right, so really, I think by the end
March.
of February, we have to submit in March, but you have to go through bond council approval or attorneys with a bond. I think if you were to target end of February, Mayor, I think you'd be on point to be ready for submission in March.
And how late into March can we submit?
It's March 13th is the hard deadline.
March
Thank you,
13th,
Sean,
Thank you.
thank you.
And then we go out for the reopen the bid on February 17th. How long is that bid period open?
Well, February 17th would be the bid opening.
Okay.
So you would go out on January 29th and February 5th, and we open the bids. We'll know what the bids are.
Okay, gotcha, 17th.
Yes.
So we have,
Is there a meeting on the 26th?
Let me look at the upcoming meeting schedule. Bessie Jo, do you have it faster than we do?
What am I looking for?
Upcoming meeting schedule. I
In
might.
February.
For February, we have the 12th, 19th, or 26th.
Okay.
So we could tentatively come to you with a recommendation for award on the 19th. That would provide very little time for validation of those results. As I said, there's some legalities in these things we keep finding. One of the issues was the individual was listed as a certain builder and a certain energy. Their public works license was listed as an energy and the other was listed as a builder. I think they're the same company, and whether that bidder has the opportunity to validate that they're doing business as, I mean, there's just a lot of little details.
Mm-hmm.
At the latest, I think we could be in a very good position with legal counsel review on the 26th,
Check.
but potentially on the 19th.
26 sounds a bit safer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we could come to you on the 19th with an update on where we're at. And if we're feeling, I mean, again, this is an interesting thing. One of the lessons for these bidders is, hey, there's a lot of issues. And we had bidders coming from out of state that aren't familiar with Idaho code. And I think that was part of the problem too.
And Mayor, I want to be clear, like, we'll do whatever we can staff-wise to work around this and keep language open and like for a set of range. And, you know, we'll do what we can. We can also preload a lot of our printables and things like that so that we can plug numbers in at the last minute and sort of try to move things along. So we'll do whatever we can to pivot. We just wanted to give you a real life look of what we're typically up against in an election like this.
So we have in March, we have the 5th and the 12th of the 2 dates that we could, if we had to push it into March to adopt the ordinance. That just gives us, I would just send it that day.
Check. Okay.
Greg, the difference between taking out $7 million in additional debt versus $10 million in debt, we talked about this 2 hours ago. I mean, we're talking about the difference between potentially a 2% or a 3% type of rate increase. Is that right?
You're talking about over and above the 3%?
Yeah.
The additional rate
That's-
increase, what we talked about earlier today was that you're looking at somewhere between a 2% maximum rate increase in 2027 and a 2% additional rate increase in 2029. Sorry, 2028. Because, and so you're saying, okay, right now we're planning for 3, we'd say let's do 2 5%. But if the number went from 7 million to 10 million, what are we talking there? I mean, we're really only talking about 1 percentage point on either side of the ledger at this point, right?
And Greg, can you, if possible, give us the real world number for the ratepayer difference? I think
Yes.
you gave us that. I think that would be helpful here.
Well, we will based on that number.
Yeah, but I think he had something in there and it was very, it was minute, and I think that's
So-
important for the council to know.
The unfortunate thing is we could go from 7 million to 10 million because of a contractor's clerical error.
Oh, yeah.
That's really
Or
frustrating.
way more than that because of what we thought we had with the low bidder.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that we have to reject this bid.
Well, Bill Punkeney's here. Bill, do you want to speak to that? That was a hard conversation we had today. It's a level of risk. Colby's question was, do we have to reject the low bid?
No, we don't have to reject the low bid at this point. We don't even really have an objection. And so, you know, it's quite, we'd have to go through the process. If we received the objection from it, we awarded the low bid and we, you know, received an objection, there's a process for that. And there's a couple of off ramps in that process so that we could reject it, but it all amounts to time. And so, you know, were we to go through that process, meeting the deadlines that we've discussed tonight would be very difficult.
And of course, they can rebid it and come right in where they are. And
I think that was the positive news we got in our conversation with the low bidder today, was that they're very interested in rebidding.
Yeah. I didn't mean to imply there was anything unethical in saying that, you know, that, or not unethical, but just the gouge thing, you know, it's the reality of uncertainty at this time. That's the cost of uncertainty, along with the cost of growth.
So, I guess to get down to it, we are all in favor of pursuing a bond election,
Yeah.
correct? And what are our next steps? What do we need out of this meeting to give to you guys?
If council gives direction for my department to begin preparations for an election in waiting of a number, I think we could get started on that. And the rest comes down to Nathan and his team.
I'm confident we can work with Erin to give her some really good numbers so that the variability, I think we can come back to you saying, okay, here's kind of worst case scenario. Here's where we think we're going to land. And whether that ballot language is enough to really force all the way out the door, or we want to wait until we get the bid results. But I think we've got what you can see about the rate increase is we're talking about 1, 2, 3% for a couple years. So Greg and I need to kind of further refine, you know, what's the difference between 7 million and 11 million. I think that's kind of where the difference is, whether we want to ask the ratepayers for that much additional funding, and whether we don't think we need that because we have done some cash balancing. So we'll get to work real hard on that. And
By the end of February, we'll have a solid number, and then we
correct.
have nearly 2 months to educate everyone on what that number means in a bond election.
May I ask a question, Mayor? It could be legal. I just want clarification. My understanding is that we'd be asking for an amount up to, but we're not bound to use all of that bond money. Is that correct? I'm more asking for
That's
the
right.
public than for myself.
That's correct.
So we think that's good information for the public to know that even if we asked for $11 million, we might not necessarily need all of that. Okay.
Yeah, I've kind of listed that here. And, you know, that's one of the things with the DEQ funding, you know, we didn't know where we would land, and so we haven't taken that money. Now, there's definitely some rationale to taking that money because of interest earned in savings accounts versus the low interest rate that we receive. So Randy's helping us with that. So I do anticipate that we're going to start taking draws because that'll help the ratepayers as well. But if we get a low bid and are able to find other cost-saving measures to bring it down, you know, we don't have to take all of the money that we don't need to. That we don't need.
Do we have any more questions, concerns, discussion on this one tonight?
No.
We're all just in a real fun position here. Hopefully, we will be able to navigate, and I think, you know, we've been able to get a lot of projects done efficiently and effectively in the past, right? I feel like our community feels like we are wasting a bunch of money by ordering the wrong pipes. You know, like, you know, that's, I think we have a proven track record of being able to get projects done so efficiently, effectively, cost effectively as possible. So thanks to all of your hard work over the years. So.
Thanks, Mayor.
Anything else?
No, you guys feel like we've got some direction.
Certainly.
So the direction is reject the bids, bring that to us for us to officially do, re-advertise fast you can, and work with Aaron to figure out the numbers. Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was one.
All right.
In case you're wondering.
Should we go home and celebrate that?
Yes, we should. It's a great idea.
The motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Armand.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone online. Okay. Well.
All right.
That was fun.
Who are the Vandals
Yeah.
playing?
I think we might need to plan on the next week's meeting to have like some kind of like mid-session yoga and stuff. Based on that.
You're still recording, FYI.
Maybe a yoga coffee break or something.
Well, there was a
Calisthenics, midway.
Yeah, it's really hard to see.
You're
stuff.
recording.
That's the one good reason to have a computer in the meeting.
And you asked some very good questions tonight.
Thanks.
Keep it up.
Thanks.